Regent Bailing.
Here.
Regent Drew Peterson.
Here.
Regent Atwell.
Here.
Regent Delgado. Regent Evers.
Here.
Regent Greeby. Regent Hall. Regent Jones.
Here.
Regent Klein. Regent Milner. Regent Mueller. Regent Chris Peterson. Regent Plant.
Here.
Regent Ring.
Here.
Regent Stile.
Here.
Regent Tyler.
Here.
Regent Whitburn. Regent Delgado.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we consider items on today's agenda, are there board members who wish to declare any conflicts of interest regarding this afternoon's open session? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and proceed to the agenda. Good afternoon, everyone, and I hope you're all having a great summer. With the pace of the academic year just around the corner, things are starting to pick up on campuses, and they've been picking up at the system offices as well. This afternoon, we'll take action on several significant issues, including the UW System's biennial budget recommendations for 2019-2021. But before we begin, President Cross has some introductions. President Cross.
Thank you, Regent President Bailing, and good afternoon, everyone. Before we get started, I'd like to extend congratulations to two regents who came up winners at the ballot box last week, Regent Tony Evers and Regent Brian Stile. The next several months are bound to be interesting, and we'll be watching you folks closely. So. Turning to introductions, so when I introduce you, I'd like for you to stand. It's my pleasure to introduce Stephen Hopper, who recently joined the UW system as Associate Vice President for Information Technology, as well as our Chief Information Officer. Stephen comes to us from the University of North Carolina system, where he served for 19 years, most recently as Interim Vice President and Chief Information Officer. He was twice nominated for the Governor's Award for Excellence in North Carolina. Stephen has extensive experience in streamlining IT operations and establishing a common strategic vision for IT. And we expect him to play a key role in our core project. So welcome, Stephen, to the UW system. Glad to have you. Sasananesa Piawi recently joined UW System's Office of Student Success as a Native American Student Success Coordinator. Oh, where is this Sasanesa? Did she disappear? So, we'll have a conversation with Sasanesa later. So, she will serve as the principal resource for areas of strategic importance related to the educational success of Native American students within the UW system. She is an enrolled member of the Menominee Nation. Growing up on the Menominee Indian Reservation of Wisconsin, she's worked in education for over 11 years, both with college and high school students at UW-Madison and within the University of Minnesota. So we welcome you, Sasanesa. I'm also pleased to introduce Jean Purcell, the new Director of Wisconsin Public Media at UW-Madison, which includes both Wisconsin Public Radio and Wisconsin Public Television. Jean was previously Executive Director of the Educational Communications Board. Several of us knew him in that role. In his new role, Jean takes the place of Malcolm Brett and will lead the UW Wisconsin Public Media as it transitions to a new division at UW-Madison. Jean is a graduate of UW-La Crosse, so welcome, Jean. We're glad to have you. I would also like to welcome Mark Pitch, our new Strategic Communications Manager. Mark comes to us from the Wisconsin State Journal, where he was an assistant city editor. He has extensive experience in higher education and government areas, so we look forward to working with you as well, Mark. Welcome. Within the Office of Educational Opportunity, it is our pleasure to welcome Associate Director Latoya Holliday. Latoya, Prior to joining OEO, LaToya worked for the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, where she most recently served as the state's charter schools consultant. She has been heavily involved in leading equity initiatives and brings to the OEO a keen interest in increasing educational equity for all students in the state. So welcome, LaToya. We're happy to have you. Finally, David Travis is the new Provost and Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at UW River Falls. David comes to River Falls from UW-Whitewater, where he served as Dean of the College of Letters and Sciences. He had been part of the Whitewater faculty since 1994 as professor, department chair, and associate dean for 2 different colleges. He earned his bachelor's and master's degree from the University of Georgia, we'll forgive him for that, and his PhD from Indiana University, and all in geography. So David, we look forward to working with you in this new role. Back to you, Regent President Bailey.
Thank you, President Cross. At this time, we'd like to officially recognize the service, commitment, and contributions of one of our colleagues whose term on the board ended in May, Regent Emeritus Tim Higgins. To lead us in a resolution of appreciation, I'm going to call on Regent Tyler. Regent Tyler.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to represent the Regents in recognizing Regent Emeritus Tim Higgins. The paths that each of us have followed to come here are varied, and the reasons that we're committed to serve vary as well. But I suspect none of us has aspired to serve as long as Tim Higgins has. During his years as a student here at UW-Madison, his aspiration then was to serve as a regent. And that became reality in 2011. The 70,000 miles traveled, the 50 campus visits, this is just part of being engaged. But I should point out that he earned a unique honor from UW Superior for their most frequent Regent Award. Whether he was visiting students, faculty, working with or for veterans, addressing the issues of freedom of expression or academic freedom, Tim has always been committed and passionate and driving for the betterment of this institution. There's a couple of areas in particular that I'd like to point out. First is Tim's work with and in leading the READY Committee. Tim's work and leadership in strategic planning, partnership development with WEDC and WISIS, economic development incentive grants, IDEA Advance, WISIS regional associates, student ambassadors, undergraduate research, and much, much more. These will all stand as wayposts that serve to mark Tim's journey through the here at the university. But more importantly than that, these activities and relationships will serve the mission of this university well into the future. The second area that I'd like to compliment, maybe a little more personal for me, is Tim's advocacy for the university. The example that I'd like to spotlight is when Tim and I had a couple of calls with legislators, and our first call was with a not-so-kind staffer. Not sure if anybody knows who that might be. Yeah, it would have been very easy for Tim to take a defensive position in that discussion, but he didn't. Instead, he kept the discussion very positive and provided strong advocacy that was befitting this institution. His experience and this experience and the discussion that followed was one of the many moments when Tim emerged as a mentor for me personally, as I'm sure he has been for others. So now I'd like to share the Regents' resolution of appreciation. Whereas Tim Higgins dedicated 6.5 years of exemplary service as a Regent of the University of Wisconsin system from November 2011 to May of 2018, and whereas serving through serving on the Research, Economic Development, and Innovation Committee, including 3 years as chair and 1 as vice chair, Tim achieved the committee's goal to elevate the knowledge economy as a priority topic for this board and to initiate its first economic development incentive grant program. And whereas Tim served as an engaged member of the Audit Committee, the Business and Finance Committee, the Education Committee, and the Student Discipline and Other Student Appeals Committee, which he chaired for 1 year. And whereas Tim was a proponent of freedom of expression, supporting a resolution in 2015 that the freedom of speech guarantees of the First Amendment underpin the UW system's three-part mission of education, research, and engagement in public service, and supporting another resolution in 2017 that affirmed the board's commitment to freedom of expression. And whereas Tim is a proud alumnus of UW-Madison, where he earned his undergraduate degree in economics and subsequently served 2 years as the Wisconsin Alumni Association National Board and earned Alumni Advocate of the Year Award in 2005. And whereas Tim has worked to publicly honor and reward the commitment of extraordinary UW educators serving on 2 Regent Award committees, diversity and academic staff excellence, and has been an advocate for advancing excellence, affordability, and accessibility within the UW system. And whereas Tim chaired the UW system tuition setting policy task force and served for more than 4 years as a regent liaison for the Wisconsin Partnership Program, 3 years as regent member of the WISIS Advisory Board, and nearly 3 years on the Hospital Advisory Board. And whereas Tim has made an effort during his time as a regent to visit each campus multiple times and chaired the special regent committee for selection of UW Green Bay's chancellor in 2014. Be it therefore resolved that the Board of Regents of the University of Wisconsin system hereby commends Tim Higgins for his service to the UW system, his outstanding commitment to, and for his outstanding commitment to higher education in Wisconsin. Signed, John Robert Bailing, President of the UW System Board of Regents. Tim?
Regent Tyler is correct. I have wanted to be a regent since I was an undergraduate here in Madison. Every member of the university community, faculty, staff, student, administrator, parent, alumnus, or alumna, gets swept up by the legacy, the vitality, the greatness, and the sheer momentum of these institutions. We all want to leave a mark, like carving our initials in a mighty tree so that future participants in that legacy know that we were there before. I will be ever grateful to Governor Scott Walker for giving me the opportunity to make my mark. I also thank Jonna, my lovely spouse, for allowing me the time and the use of our shared resources to do the job as I saw fit. I've done my best. I hope to watch the UW system continue to flourish as it carries out its triple mission of teaching, research, and public service. Of course, I thank Regent Tyler for his kind words and the entire board for the resolution, for approving the resolution he proposed. Did we vote on that? Sorry. Though quoting Huck Finn, I must say Regent Tyler told the truth mainly. There was some things which he stretched, but mainly he told the truth. I also thank Regent President Baling and President Cross for these mementos. I will cherish them. Turnabout, however, is fair play. So now, I'd like to ask Regent President Baling to step forward and accept, on behalf of the board, a little something from Jonna and me. So let me ask if the RV people, AV people are already ahead of me. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And I think Jess and her team are handing out a description of this little memento. There we go.
Let's get your bride.
Jess, we need Jess. We need Jess.
Jess, there you go.
Very good. 1, 2, 3. Do one more. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you. There you go. I don't know what you're going to do with it.
Yeah, that's
Well, since most of you, my fellow regents, UW system and campus administrators, and the faculty, staff, and students of our many institutions were required to listen to my thoughtful comments, feeble attempts at humor, and downright rants when I was a member of this august body, I hope to partially atone for wasting your time by making my valedictory remarks optional. You will find them among today's meeting materials. As Regent President Emeritus Mike Falbo often said, regents can read. But to read or not to read is entirely your decision. Best wishes to you all, and God bless us, everyone.
Thank you, Regent Emeritus Higgins. You are a friend who we will miss deeply, and please come see us soon. Turning next to the agenda, item number 4. This afternoon, we'll be considering the UW system's biennial budget recommendations. To frame those discussions and provide some context to why the UW system is a worthy investment. First, we'll ask Dr. David J. Ward, President of North Star Analytics, to present the findings of his new economic impact report to the UW system. The last study of this kind was done back in 2002, so it's clearly time for an update. Following his presentation, we'll have the opportunity for questions. After hearing from Dr. Ward, I'll invite Chancellors Debbie Ford and Dean Van Galen to come talk to us about advocating for the value of higher education and drawing on the Guardians Initiative, which is a plan developed by the Association of Governing Boards on Universities and Colleges. The Guardians Initiative aligns with much of what we are already doing and also offers some additional resources. Regent Vice President Drew Peterson and Regent Ryan Ring will join our two chancellors in making that presentation. Then we'll move to consider the funding request for the UW system's operational and capital budget. I've asked President Cross to lead us in the budget discussions, and President Cross, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Regent President Baling. So today, in a few minutes, we will be asking you, the University of Wisconsin Board of Regents, to approve and support our 2019-21 biennial budget request. This is one of the most significant actions this board will consider. So before we proceed and present our biennial budget request, we want to provide you with some background on the value proposition of higher education. So first, before we do that, I would like to reiterate that we are grateful to the people of Wisconsin for their support of the UW system. We should never forget that we are a public institution by and for the people of this state. Inherently, our mission is to meet their needs and to serve the public interest. As you will see today, an investment in the University of Wisconsin system is an excellent investment in many ways. The UW system is widely considered among the best systems of public education in the world. Our students and our faculty are in high demand as the innovative thinkers and creative problem solvers that the 21st century needs and expects. At a time when higher education is more important than ever, we award more than 36,000 degrees annually. It is also widely understood that we are the state's largest talent and innovation pipeline. Our groundbreaking research, entrepreneurial know-how, and boundless creative energy are changing people's lives for the better in Wisconsin and beyond. We're helping to find cures for autism, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and the common cold, just to name a few. We're investigating the roots of poverty, developing the next generation of computer operating systems, and finding new ways to use technology to help keep our Great Lakes a freshwater treasure. Our researchers are expanding our understanding of how we learn language, exploring neutrinos originating from the furthest points of our universe. Developing longer-lasting batteries to power our automobiles and a million other devices. In other words, we're on the front lines of addressing not just Wisconsin's challenges, but global challenges. Leading research that translates ideas into innovation and discoveries that might change someone's life and or change the world. Yearly, on average, a new patent is issued every 49 hours to UW system researchers and entrepreneurs. That's one every other day. Let me repeat that. That's one patent every other day. We are also striving to keep our high-quality higher education affordable and accessible. We continue to expand capacity in high-demand programs the state needs. Programs like healthcare, engineering, and computer science. Collaborating with the people of Wisconsin and global business communities, we are helping to create new job opportunities and helping to provide the talent to fill those jobs, some of which don't even exist yet. In reality, we're preparing graduates to not just be future employees, but also we're creating future employers. We're helping to lead this state into the future. Throughout history, higher education has always had its doubters and its critics. But at a time when objective analysis clearly shows that a college education is more valuable and more necessary than ever, there should be no doubt, no question, about the need to invest in higher education. Yes, we may need to do a better job of communicating the value that higher education offers to both individuals and to society. But it is much more than just helping someone get a better job or a job. In the bigger picture, the college experience helps prepare someone for life and a career that is meaningful, impactful, and personally rewarding. Yes, it also increases their earning power, including ways to break the intergenerational poverty problem, but its value is much greater than the economic impact it has on a graduate. Is it the only way to do this? Of course not. But college is clearly a proven, effective path to a better life to which thousands of our alumni can attest. As President Baling noted, our presenters this afternoon are here to address the value of higher education from different perspectives. The bottom line, however, is simple. Investing in the UW system is a really wise investment. With that, I will turn the floor over to Dr. David Ward, CEO of North Star Analytics, to present the findings of their new economic impact study. David?
Thank you, President Cross, and good afternoon, everybody. And thank you to the many people who welcomed me back, who thought I had disappeared into Door County. I'm glad to be back and to deliver what I think is some pretty good news. So as Regent Baling mentioned, the first economic development or economic impact study was done by North Star Economics, a company that I founded in 2000, and I delivered that report to the board in 2002. At that time, the economic impact of the University of Wisconsin system was $9.5 billion. We were trying to get all of the campuses and all of the activities into one study. So this last year, we have undertaken a refreshing of that study and have developed some impact measures. This is what we call in our business the splash page. It contains all of the information on one page. These studies used to run 200 pages, and we found our customers didn't read them. They just wanted to know the answer. So this is the answer right here. So a couple of things about the splash page. It tells you pretty much the entire outcome of the study. The study is based on a fiscal year. This happened to be 2016-17. So that time frame needs to be established. And it's an annual economic impact. Think of this happening every year and increasing as activity increasing. The data that's needed to calculate this is basically spending data. It's spending that makes the economy roll. So we have to capture all of the spending within the UW and its related institutions. I'll say more about that in a minute. Once we have that activity categorized, we clean up the data and present it in such a way that we can run it through an econometric model. And we use IMPLAN, which is run by the FERC at UW-Whitewater and Professor Russ Cashion. I'll say a little bit more about Russ in a minute. Finally, there's the output of the model. The model is a huge number of equations that describe economic activity throughout the state and the nation. And these equations and algorithms are run, the data is inputted, and we end up with the top line results. So these are the results the customers are mostly interested in. If you look in the top left, the overall economic impact is just a shade over $24 billion. If you're very precise, it's $24 billion, $10 million, if you like to, get down to the penny. That activity generates 167,000 jobs. We always say generates and supports, because some of that as the money goes through the economy, it creates other jobs. And very important number is the tax number that is generated by the economic activity. That's $1.1 billion in state and local taxes. And I'll have more to say about each of those numbers as we go through the presentation. A very important point that we learned early on about economic impact studies for universities in particular, or public institutions, was the question, well, who benefits from that? And the model produces a list of beneficiaries. We'll go through that in more detail as well. But 75% of the benefit of that $24 billion, or about $18 billion, goes directly into the private sector. And finally, as President Cross was indicating about, is this a good investment for the state? The leverage ratio we calculate is that for every dollar the state invests in the university, we get $23 of economic activity. So those are the highlights, the splash page. We'll come back to it. Let's start out with the $24 billion economic impact. Where would such a number come from? Who contributes to that? You start with the campuses. That's the largest. You're going to be considering a budget of, I assume, something over $6 billion today. That spending is very important to the state's economy. Then we have UW hospitals and clinics. The UW students, if you think of students as tourists who stay for 9 months, it's an easy model to think about. Their spending is very important. We get visitors to the campuses, not only athletic events, but parents visiting students, people who are coming in to do work on university campuses, on information systems and so forth. We have the UW Research Park, a very visible manifestation of university research activity out on Mineral Point Road and the extension beyond that. We have affiliated organizations that exist only because the UW campuses exist. And finally, the thing that really distinguishes this study from the 2002 study, we have a much higher level of startup activity that emanates from UW research or UW entrepreneurs. The 167,000 jobs generated in the state, there are some comments about that that I think are important. The labor income, which you might have seen on the splash page, is $9.3 billion. Think of that as paychecks around the state. The average job created by the University of Wisconsin System Economic Activity has a total labor income, now that's a kind of an economist term, that includes the wages and the benefits, of $55,502. So the average job created of the 167,000 jobs has a labor income of $55,000. The average labor income of all jobs in the state is $40,500. So we are creating not only a lot of jobs, but jobs that are high-value jobs. With respect to the tax generation, the largest amount of taxes generated is $471 million in property taxes. As many of you know, I happen to be on the City Council of Sturgeon Bay, something I'm evaluating personally. All politics are local, I found that out. And we look to 60% of our budget from property taxes. So this is really important. Sales tax is about $382 million, income tax is about $211 million, and corporate tax is about $40 million. It comes to $1.1 billion of activity, taxes that are coming out of this activity from UW system. Finally, we try to help our customers and other people who are interested in this put these numbers in perspective. When you tell somebody, oh, the UW system has $24 billion of economic impact, that's what we call an eye-glazing number. People look at that number, it's hard to imagine $1 million and you're telling me it's $24 billion. How do I put that into some kind of perspective? There are two measures here. One is that if you look at the economic activity, it accounts for about $7.70 of every $100 of economic activity in the state. The state's economy at the time we did this was about $315 billion gross state product. The second perspective is on jobs. So 167,000 jobs, what does that mean? Well, the labor force in Wisconsin is about 3 million. So that represents about 5.5% of all jobs in the state, or 1 in 20 jobs. Considering the economic benefit, you will remember before I said 75% of the economic benefit goes to the private sector. And there's a little interesting story behind this, because we've done a lot of economic impact studies for not only UW institutions, but other institutions outside of the UW. But one of the studies we were doing, the chancellor said, here's what I want for output. I want to be able to go to the Rotary meeting and tell the car dealer how much money that car dealer is realizing because of the university's economic activities, student spending, visitor spending, employee spending. Because I'm always getting beat up by this car dealer for spending too much money, and it doesn't help me out. So we started to look at the model, and the model produces a long list of sectors that benefit from UW economic activity. You can see all of those up here. They sort of follow a pattern. If you think about consumer spending and institutional spending, the three largest are real estate, hospitals, and computer services. Leveraging the state tax dollars, we said that before about a 23-to-1 ratio. So the state invests about $1 billion a year into the University of Wisconsin system. We get out of that about $24 billion in economic activity. Again, from an investment standpoint, it's a 1 to 23 ratio. Now, the economic impact study captures a lot of numbers, and there's a lot of output, but we don't capture a number of things which I would argue are as important or more important to the state. So what is the economic impact of the University of Wisconsin on the labor force, on earnings in the state, and on the Wisconsin tax base? Early in one of our studies, one of the chancellors at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee wanted to know more about how graduates impacted the local economy. And we were able to obtain some data from the Alumni Association that tracked graduates to their current place of employment. So the number we've put in the study, 91% of the graduates 1 year after graduation, that's all graduates, in-state and out-of-state, live in Wisconsin. But the UWM study, which was a much longer period of time, looked at corporations that employed 100 or more UW-Milwaukee graduates. The list is impressive. Deloitte, Northwestern Mutual, Rockwell, Harley, Wisconsin Energies, Johnson Controls, Baird, GE, Aurora, the list goes on. So this impact is not directly calculated in terms of enabling those firms to produce product and services and contribute to the state's economy. There's also this map, which I find to be very interesting. It's from some UW system data, which tracks where all UW alumni live, including Wisconsin residents, Minnesota reciprocity, and non-residents. You can pretty much see the intensity of the green in the state of Wisconsin. The vast majority of our graduates live in our state. There are some other areas where they live. On each coast, there are some clusters, and then the Twin Cities and the Chicago area. We also want to look at what the impact of the number of graduates is on earnings and income in the state. This is a chart we've used since really the forming of North Star Economics back in 2000, which charts both the unemployment rate and the weekly earnings by education level. This chart has not changed substantially. If anything, it's widened toward the top of the curve with higher education. But what it tells you is there's an inverse relationship between the education level and unemployment. The higher your education level, the lower your unemployment. And there's a direct relationship between the education level and the average weekly earnings. I always point out as a former professor that there's a little penalty for getting a doctorate right there at the top. But, you know, I'm no longer employee of the Board of Regents, so it doesn't do much good to plead that case. If we look at the Wisconsin tax base and the UW system, earnings of UW system graduates are better than $1 million greater than a high school graduate. That adds to the tax base. Their investments in their communities add to the tax base. There are some things not captured in this about the tax base as well, because part of the tax base is used to pay for social costs. There's a lot of research out there that will show you that social costs decrease for the state as the educational level rises. So there's less need for social services of the state. We want to extend some thank yous to System President Ray Cross, to Associate Vice President David Bruchart, to the UW system staff, Heather Leroy and her team for the graphic works that were done here, to Dr. Russ Cashian and the UW Whitewater Fiscal Economic Research Center. Russ is one of two sources we have in the state who maintains an up-to-date in-plan model, which means the multipliers and all of the data are as current as you can get. So we very much appreciate his help. Finally, just to show you the splash page one more time to remind you of the good news that's here. The $24 billion economic impact, 167,000 jobs, and those are really good paying jobs. The amount of tax dollars that are generated in the state, and the overwhelming benefit of UW activity goes to the private sector. And finally, this is one very good investment because it produces a leverage ratio of 23-1. I also want to recognize my co-author sitting in the audience. Bruce, you want to just raise your hand? There were two of us working on this, largely long-distance calls between Sturgeon Bay and Menominee, Wisconsin. In this virtual world, it's easy to get work done that way, but I appreciate Bruce's help. He becomes the document master and keeps the many versions of the report that go around. With that, I'll entertain any questions you might have.
Regents, any questions for Dr. Ward? Regent Peterson.
Thank you, David. Excellent presentation as usual. Glad to have you back.
Thank you.
You know, I think there's a tremendous focus on the economic impact and what it means for our students, our campuses, our communities. One thing that we hear a lot of, particularly in the READY Committee, is the focus on technology transfer, the migration to commercialization. You highlighted the fact that startup activity is really boosted in this most recent version. Do you recall where it was? I think it's at 13% now. What's that growth look like, and what's your analysis on why we're seeing more of that take place?
Well, the first study we did was using data from 2001. There was very little economic startup activity. We had the research park starting up here. That was showing some early success, but there were very, very low numbers, virtually zero contribution to this, to that first report. That economic activity, that's the real hallmark difference to me between what was happening 15, 18 years ago. And I have a pretty good perspective of this, having been in so many different positions. Somebody says I can't hold a job, I resent that. But in the UW, I've just seen that economic activity, largely first concentrated in Madison, spreading Milwaukee, and now out to the comprehensive campuses. So, you know, I think the next time this study is done, you'll see even more of that. The growth rate there is phenomenal.
Regent Tyler.
So this is always great information. And I try and correlate it back to, how we think about things in business. And in business, oftentimes over time, we find that if we underinvest over time, the return becomes higher once we do invest. And if we overinvest in time, the return on that investment becomes less. Mm-hmm. And so my question, and this may be well outside the context of your analysis, but the question that I would have is, does further investment accelerate the return or de-accelerate? In other words, you know, if we put another, you know, $1 billion in, are we going to get the same return? Are we going to get less than this, more than this, or where? Any sense of where we're at?
So do you remember what President Truman said about economists?
I don't.
You don't? Okay. What did he say? He said he wanted to meet a one-armed economist because the economist wouldn't say on the one hand this and on the other hand that, right? So that's the kind of answer I'm going to give you. It depends. It depends on what activity you invest in. If you're going to invest, if the University of Wisconsin system is going to invest in grocery stores, the return there, the multipliers are all very low. If it's going to invest in high-value research, and the outcome of that is commercialization, then the return is going to be very high. So, you know, and I would also say if you're going to invest in more graduates, the data out there would indicate, on average, that those graduates are going to earn more. So that's a good investment for the state. So I can't say $1 billion more would do this or do that. It depends on where you put it. And that, and to some extent, depends on the Board of Regents and the choices they make in these budgets going forward.
Regent Milner.
Yes, and the numbers escape me now, but it seems to me that I remember the number of graduates in Wisconsin lags Minnesota and several other states. As a matter of fact, the number of college graduates,
Yes.
I'm talking about college graduates.
Right.
And what we've talked about before is the ability to tap into that partial or unclaimed market. In other words, they have some credits but no degree. It is really an opportunity. Does that, from your data that you've looked at, you talk about undergraduate advancement, does that mean that do you think that investments in that untapped market can improve our economic position?
If you believe, as I do, that labor demand is getting for more skilled labor, that we're essentially trying to take out lower level jobs with either automation or somehow replacing that kind of activity, and the kind of activity that remains is higher value activity, then the quickest way to get there is to take people who have some college and, you know, get them to the finish line. So I think that's a very good investment. Minnesota on average has about 6% more college graduates in its population, in its labor force population. Their average per capita income is something between $6,000 and $7,000 more than Wisconsin. Now that's by the nature of the economy. I always say that, you know, there are reasons for that, and it's the nature of the economy. Our economy, I think, is changing and is becoming a lot more high-tech. And there's more opportunity, I think, to grow in that space with college-educated labor force.
Regents, other questions? Regent Atwell.
I just want to offer push a little deeper into the subject of your statement that spending makes the economy grow. Certainly true in an econometric sense, not disputing that at all, and I'm very grateful for all of your work. I'm a financial intermediary by trade, and so I'm always tempted to see the flow of our funds as creating the prosperity that we observe. But I always try to remind our people, and I think it's important to keep in front of us that I would say at a deeper level, it's human work, human effort, human ingenuity, and specifically the ability of people to work together for worthwhile purposes that is the foundation of the spending. So the econometric model suggests a consumption-driven view. I think it's important, and as we talk about economic development, I think we can lead ourselves a little bit astray if we don't focus on what's the human activity, who's doing that work, and what's the outcome of it. And I just offer that as something I try to keep in front of me, so I'm not tempted to think it's the money that I control that causes prosperity. It's actually work. Thank you.
And that's a very good comment, because it's the entrepreneurship, it's what people do with the money and how they create that effort that's very important. And part of what I've said in the last a few slides was that we didn't capture a number of things in this study. They either don't have a ready economic marker on them, or you have to estimate what that's worth. So what is teamwork worth, or cooperation or so forth? Yeah. There are things other than dollars, even though Regent Delgado says the only time he ever sees me is when I'm talking about money.
Regent Klein.
Thank you, Regent President Bailey. I think it's really interesting and very informative. When you spoke earlier, David, to the Ready Committee, you talked about not all spending is equal, and I think what you said was that spending in the construction area and spending on research are two kind of high-value propositions in terms of where we're focused. Could you, did I hear that right, and could you expand?
You did. And so if you went into the econometric model, if you're sleepy, if you're having trouble going to sleep, get some econometric model description data, it'll put you right to sleep. But there are within that, those models, there are job and spending multipliers. And that is a function of the value of activity going on. So I don't mean to demean grocery stores, but they're essentially, you stock the store, somebody walks out with it, and the largest part of that value is the stock that came in, the raw product that came in. It doesn't add much value to it. If you contrast that with a manufacturing operation that takes a piece of steel and makes it into something that's more valuable and sells that, transports it and sells it, there's more economic activity both in terms of level and speed in those kinds of operations.
Regent Milner.
One more, as long as no one else has, one more comment. You talked about when you talked about the growth in entrepreneurship from 2002, one of the things that if you connect that to investment, one of the things that I would suggest is we've made that investment to the comprehensive campuses and in WISIS. And also UW-Madison has made that investment into the product, taking an idea to product to market. They've made that investment. So to a certain extent, those investments, that extra money that went into that has reaped benefits for the state as a whole, in addition to the individuals that were part of it. Is that not a part of that?
It is part of that, and I have to declare my conflict of interest because I'm the chair of the WISIS board, and I know. And so I'm seeing that the marginal return, I think, on the money being invested is very high, because we're tapping markets and areas that are not fully tapped. We're not even scratching the surface. And it's important to say about what the Regents have invested, what UW-Madison has invested, and what WARF has invested in WISIS, to spread that around the state and to increase and leverage what's going on the comprehensive campuses. I think that return, next study down, you're going to see a remarkable return there.
Any other questions for Dr. Ward? If not, let's give him a round of applause and thank you for his presentation. Thank you, Dr. Ward. Next, we'll ask Chancellors Debbie Ford and Dean Van Galen to join the board and talk about the Guardians Initiative. As I mentioned earlier, also two of our Regent colleagues have also been involved in these discussions, Regent Vice President Peterson and Regent Ryan Ring. And following the Chancellor's presentations, they will share their thoughts as well. As a side note, you'll notice we have a videographer joining us today, and he'll be moving around the room. AGB is very interested in our advocacy for higher education and expressed an interest in perhaps using some of the video footage from today's meeting. With this in mind, Chancellor Ford and Chancellor Van Galen, the floor is yours, and thank you.
Well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to join Chancellor Ford and Regents Drew Peterson and Ryan Ring to discuss the Regents and other UW systems' role in communicating and advocacy for higher education, and also how the Guardians Initiative, which is a new strategic advocacy plan developed by AGB, can support our efforts. Chancellor Ford and I will start by providing some background and context, and then Regents Peterson and Ring will share their thoughts. And to conclude, we would like to open things up for some discussion. The need for more effective communication and advocacy around the work and value of higher education goes far beyond the state of Wisconsin and the next state budget. It is truly a national issue. On one hand, a CNBC article last week on a study by Sallie Mae indicated that 90% of families agree college is a worthwhile investment despite the cost. In addition, 83% said they believe they'll earn more with a college degree, and more than 3/4, or 77%, said that a degree is even more important now than it has been in the past. However, it seems not a day goes by without seeing another article or hearing a story that questions the value of higher education. A recent study from the Pew Research Center, for instance, indicated that many Americans believe higher education is heading in the wrong direction, albeit for many very, very different reasons. Often the negative narratives include incomplete or inaccurate information about college costs, the value of a degree, and the work of our faculty and staff. Sometimes the information is presented without context. We all agree our colleges and universities must be responsive and accountable. However, in many cases, there's a huge gap between the rhetoric and misperceptions about higher education and the reality. Leaders of the UW system are in a unique position to address these misperceptions and to help reclaim the public trust in higher education in Wisconsin and beyond. As we think about telling the UW story, I think it's important to recognize a strong history of engagement and advocacy demonstrated over the many years by members of this board. I know that I speak for my fellow chancellors when I express gratitude to the many current and past regents who engage with elected officials and other leaders. We also thank you for visiting our campuses and engaging with our communities. Those activities enable regents to speak firsthand about the impact and value of the UW system. Regent Emeritus Tim Higgins, also known as the roving regent, has been a model in that regard, visiting many campuses around the state and serving as a passionate advocate with business leaders and legislators. And on behalf of UW River Falls, I want to take this opportunity to express my personal gratitude for the strong engagement of regents on and beyond our campus. And I know this is happening throughout the UW system. Next, a bit about the Guardians Initiative, which is a national effort that has been launched by the Association of Governing Boards, or AGB. The goal of this effort, as stated by AGB, is clear and bold. The Guardians Initiative aims to reclaim public trust in higher education. As explained on the AGB website, this initiative was launched to involve college and university trustees in countering growing skepticism about the value of higher education. This campaign seeks to create a new force of influential, informed citizens who can speak about with independent credibility about the many benefits of higher education to the individual and to American society. Through this initiative, AGB is providing governing board members and other leaders with a set of well-organized and well-researched tools as resources for regents as they engage and communicate about the value of higher education. Among the many resources included in the Guardians Initiative is a series of educational briefings on a variety of topics, including the business of higher education, how our universities are reimagining educational programs to meet the changing needs of students and society, and how to calculate return on college investment. I encourage you to look at the AGB website, which is, of course, available in the materials. The infographic you see here, for example, points to the strong correlation between job security and educational attainment, showing that at the peak of the Great Recession, those with bachelor's degrees experienced an unemployment rate of 4.7%, while the jobless rate for those without a college degree was double that. Moreover, college graduates are more likely to describe their work environments positively, and they consistently experience lower levels of unemployment. Here's a quick look at two other infographics that drive home the fact that U.S. colleges and universities make a significant contribution to America's economy, which certainly echoes what we heard from Dr. Ward. The Guardians Initiative contains a variety of tools to help people like us tell the story of higher education more effectively. National data, talking points, suggestions for getting engaged. We are already doing many of these things, but it's important to remember that we are not alone. We are part of a national effort to reclaim public trust in higher education. The resources and support of the initiative provide an opportunity to enhance understanding of higher education at the national level, and especially in Wisconsin. I think we have a tremendous opportunity to be more effective advocates and to ultimately increase ownership of the UW across the state of Wisconsin. Finally, I encourage us to never forget about the why it is so important to advocate for higher education. This summer, I received an envelope containing a handwritten note from one of our graduates. I can tell you that such notes are almost always positive, and this one was positive. Yes, it was an old-fashioned kind of letter. It was from Corey Windorf. Corey came to UW River Falls as a first-generation college student from Brookfield, Wisconsin, in the fall of 2007. Here's a part of Corey's note, which is on the screen. He said, "I cannot express my gratitude enough to UWRF for taking a chance on a student who barely graduated high school. The small class size and close contact with professors, along with the help room and tutoring resources available across the campus, allowed me to be successful in my academic studies. The ability to study abroad opened the world to me for study and travel. The McNair program prepared me for graduate school. To see the university in the hands of loving people that wish to advance it and be part of the community warms my heart." Well, after graduation from UW River Falls in 2012, Corey completed a PhD degree in chemistry at the University of California, Irvine. Dr. Corey Windorf is now conducting postdoctoral research at Florida State University on the chemistry of berkelium and californium. And for you non-chemists, that's towards the bottom of the periodic table, and there's a lot of exciting stuff that goes on there. And I talked to Corey Monday morning. I called him in the lab in Tallahassee, and he's really excited about what he's doing. So, you know, these stories are repeated again and again throughout the UW system. Higher education transforms lives. It changes the trajectory of lives. It is worthy of support and our collective advocacy. It's now my pleasure to turn the floor over to Chancellor Debbie Ford.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, President Bailing and President Cross, for allowing us to share a few thoughts about how to amplify our efforts and our voices in support of the University of Wisconsin system, our faculty and staff, our students, and our graduates. Thank you, Dean, for setting the context of how to incorporate the new Guardians Initiative resources from AGB, and thank you for sharing Corey's inspiring story. For the next few minutes, I will share important facts that demonstrate why the University of Wisconsin system is a great investment for students, for families, for employers, and communities. And I hope to set the stage for how this provides the foundation for us to tell our story and reclaim the public trust. I will share examples in three categories: affordable quality, talent development, and return on investment as we prepare our graduates for life. One of our primary goals as a university is to provide affordable, accessible, and quality learning experiences on all of our campuses. We have the metrics to demonstrate our quality, with Madison being ranked 27th worldwide by the Center of World University Rankings, and several UW comprehensive campuses are highly ranked nationally and regionally. And we know that many academic programs across our campuses are fully accredited by program accreditors and are recognized for quality. Let me share a few examples from my home campus, UW Parkside. Over the past 2 decades, 89% of UW Parkside graduates who have applied to medical school have been accepted. This is twice the national average of just 40%. UW Parkside's undergraduate program in criminal justice is ranked as the top program in Wisconsin for its support of careers in criminal justice and corrections by correctionalofficer.org. And we're happy to report that our undergraduate program in sport management is in number 5 nationally by schools.com for best colleges for sport management degrees. Every chancellor can tell similar stories of how their own academic programs stand out and how these rankings and recognitions serve as evidence of the outstanding quality of a UW education. In relation to affordability, as you see on the slide, 2/3 of UW students receive financial aid, and our students continue to graduate with lower debt than their peers across the nation. In one study, Wisconsin graduates ranked number 33 nationally with an average debt of just over $29,000, while some reports have national average student debt topping $35,000. And I can tell you from the research that I did, it is many different reports talk about student debt. It is important to note that 35% of UW graduates complete their degrees with 0 debt. And that's something we continue to work on. And we know tuition and tuition increases remain lower for Wisconsin residents than in surrounding states. The next slide. Educating and preparing the next generation of talent for our state and beyond remains the primary goal for our institution. Every chancellor has excellent examples of how we continue to partner across all sectors to meet the needs of both students, graduates, and employers. A few prominent examples I'd like to share. One is the recent announcement by Northwestern Mutual, UW-Milwaukee, and Marquette University to create the Northwestern Mutual Data Science Institute, a $40 million partnership to help foster Milwaukee as a rich hub for technology and to create opportunities for students and industries in the region. At the June Board of Regents meeting, Chancellor Schmidt discussed the new partnership between Mayo Clinic and UW-Eau Claire. And at the April Board of Regents meeting, Chancellor Miller and several business leaders from Green Bay talked about the importance of the new engineering curriculum at UWGB and how it will positively impact economic growth. In Southeast Wisconsin, I am partnering and collaborating with Chancellors Money and Copper and our colleagues at the other Milwaukee 7 colleges and universities to create HERA, the Higher Education Regional Alliance. Our strategic goals include increasing educational attainment, offering academic programs to support regional needs, and strengthening the talent bridge between higher education and regional employers across all industries. And of course, we cannot talk about talent development without talking about Foxconn's decision to expand in North America right here in Wisconsin. At the time of the initial Foxconn announcement in 2017, Chairman Terry Goh cited the strength of higher education in the upper Midwest and Wisconsin specifically as one of the top reasons for locating Foxconn's U.S. headquarters in the Badger State. Significantly, Foxconn selected UW Parkside as a location for the rollout of its $1 million Smart Cities, Smart Futures competition, and 3 additional UW campus cities, Green Bay, Eau Claire, and Milwaukee, have been selected as sites for Foxconn Innovation Centers. The bottom line is the university's role as a state's leading talent supplier and creative engine for innovation and entrepreneurship is front and center with these and many other developments. As David Ward noted in his presentation, a large majority of UW system graduates remain in our state, and this map again shows where our alumni reside. Dean and I represent campuses on the state border, And we know that while some of our graduates may live in a border state, many choose to study and work in Wisconsin. As our state grows and evolves, we are increasingly asked to grow the number of graduates with degrees in science and technology, engineering, math, and the health sciences. And this was discussed earlier at the Education Committee meeting. Over the past decade, the percentage of UW system degrees awarded in the STEM and health fields has increased 30%, from 29% to 38% overall. And of course, that number is expected to grow even more as many of the new programs before you as regents will relate to STEM and the health sciences. Let's talk about the return on investment. The UW is a great investment for students, family, alumni, and communities. One of the reasons I was attracted to and why I joined UW in 2009 was because at the time, the strategic plan was 6 words: grow people, grow careers, and grow communities. As I reflect on the past 9 years, I believe we have, and more importantly, we will continue to grow people by transforming lives. We will grow careers through quality academic programs and entrepreneurship. And we will grow communities through partnerships and the focus on improving the quality of life. We know, both nationally and in the UW system, college graduates earn more over a lifetime. They tend to be more engaged in their communities as volunteers and leaders, and they use their learning experiences to adapt and to lead in the world of accelerating change. We also have evidence from our graduating senior surveys and our alumni surveys of the impacts our graduates make in our communities, our state, and around the world. And Corey is evidence of that, as Dean described. Dr. Ward talked about the impact of research and economic development across the UW system. We are proud of the faculty and staff who are making groundbreaking discoveries, building lasting relationships and partnerships, and creating interactive and experiential learning environments for all of our students. We have so many examples of excellent teaching, research, and scholarship and service happening across the UW system. And I want to thank you, the regents, for making time in your meetings to tell the stories of faculty and student success and as you travel around the state. Let me share one example from UW Parkside. Biological Sciences professor Greg Richards received a 3-year grant from the National Institutes of Health to explore, as he describes, one of the most fundamental questions of life: how organisms sense and respond to stresses such as heat, cold, and nutrient starvation. The majority of the NIH grant funds support undergraduate students working in his lab. And here's how he describes the work, and I quote, "A key strength of UW Parkside is the excellent real-world experiences students attain doing research in the labs of faculty, which helps them become very employable. I love having students doing research in my lab, and I greatly value training students in scientific thinking and practical lab skills. Students who I have mentored in research have been featured as co-authors on 5 peer-reviewed research publications, and the students I have worked with have gone on to medical school, pharmacy school, and graduate school in microbiology, as well as in careers in the biotech industry, veterinary tech, and chiropractic medicine," end quote. Thank you, Dr. Richards, and all UW system faculty for inspiring our student and the next generation of UW system graduates. The next slide. As Dr. Ward shared, and it is worth repeating, the UW system is a powerful economic engine with a $24 billion impact on the Wisconsin economy, and every state dollar invested in the UW system provides a $23 return on investment. Next slide. So how might we use the examples of quality, affordability, focus on talent development, and return on investment to tell the UW story more broadly? As we embark on the biennial budget process for 2019-2021, we encourage regents and chancellors to join together. Might we visit editorial boards, local civic organizations, and elected officials together? How about joint op-eds and media interviews? And how might we use the AGB resources to inform our work as guardians? For example, a few years ago, Regent President Emeritus Falbo joined with me for a radio interview on affordability, and Regent President Emeritus Pruitt participated in editorial board interviews with both the Kenosha News and Racine Journal-Times on the value of the UW. I am looking forward to partnering with UW Parkside's Regent liaisons, Regent Atwell and Regent Grebe, to amplify the UW system story across the state and, of course, in Southeast Wisconsin. And I would be remiss if I also did not say thank you. Thank you to all of the regents who participate in our commencement ceremonies, as your presence demonstrates the transformative power of the University of Wisconsin. On behalf of Chancellor Van Galen, thank you for this opportunity to share our thoughts on the importance of telling the UW story. Now, Regent Vice President Peterson and Regent Ring will share their perspectives.
Thank you, Chancellor Floyd and Chancellor Van Galen. We appreciate you bringing forward and sharing the AGB Guardians Initiative Plan. As you've noted, the plan aligns with the strategies and actions that we're already pursuing, and it offers some valuable additional resources and insights. I'd like to begin our part of the presentation by reminding everyone how state statute describes our roles as members of this board. The primary responsibility for governance of the system shall be vested in the Board of Regents, which shall enact policies and promulgate rules for governing the system, plan for the future needs of the state for university education, ensure the diversity of quality undergraduate programs while preserving the strength of the state's graduate training and research centers, and promote the widest degree of institutional autonomy within the controlling limits of system-wide policies and priorities established by this board. Planning for future needs, ensuring quality, preserving strength, and promoting institutional autonomy all sound good. Implied in all of these is board member advocacy. It's part of our job to make the University of Wisconsin system have the financial and community support and the operational resources necessary to achieve these tasks. We're all aware of some of the national survey data that's out there expressing public skepticism about the value of higher education. Given the preponderance of evidence to the contrary, I see this as a clarion call to action for the members of this board. For us to fulfill our statutory responsibilities, we need the business community, our elected officials, and the general public to see the value in higher education and to see the investment the state makes in the UW system as a worthwhile and wholly impactful. We're already doing many of these things that the AGB initiative calls for, including routinely meeting with legislators, writing columns, and making presentations to community groups. I think we can do more, and I think we need to do more, especially in support of the budget proposal we'll be considering shortly. There are many different opportunities for board members to participate in this advocacy process. Ryan and I, for example, will be doing joint columns placed around the state in the coming weeks with Chancellors Ford and Van Galen, promoting the value of higher education as both an individual and a public good. I'd encourage you to continue to meet with your local elected officials in your regions to discuss the return on investment the state receives from your university. I would also encourage you to work with system staff to develop presentations for your local Rotary clubs or chambers of commerce, to attend and participate in campus events, and simply put, to increase your visibility as a board member. All these efforts, big and small, help to promote the UW system and demonstrate the board's clear support and engagement in this process. I've found in my personal conversations with legislators and with our colleagues on campuses and in talks I've given to local civic organizations that making the case for increased focus and commitment to bolstering the resources of the UW system are very well received. It can also spur additional creative thoughts. all the while mobilizing interested citizens to step up and lend their hand. There's nothing more powerful than assembling a half-dozen business leaders or civic leaders to draft and send a letter to their local elected officials championing the values of their local campus. Elected officials respect these communications. They take them seriously, and they store that information in their heads, so when they return to Madison to cast key votes in committees or respective houses, they're well informed. Ensuring we have a well-informed set of legislators is of paramount importance as we contemplate the next biennial budget, one that I believe will be extremely focused on future higher education investments and with key performance metrics in place to chart our progress. I appreciate and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts on this important public policy pursuit. And now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Regent Ryan Ring.
When I submitted my name to be appointed to this board, I had several main reasons. I wanted to do something to continue to ensure the affordability of a UW system institution education for students like me, to work to expand educational opportunities, and to maximize the return on investment for both taxpayers and students. I also thought it'd be pretty cool to be a regent. More seriously, as Regent Peterson just noted, the public uncertainty about the value of higher education should give us all concern. That includes significant concerns from my peers, people I know, who wonder whether the cost of a college degree is worth it. As a student representative on this board, I have met with students all over the state. Yes, they are concerned about costs. Yes, they are concerned about getting a job and about how their education will pay off. But here's the thing. There are also some of the best ambassadors the UW system could ask for. Their stories, our stories, are the ones we need to tell. And partnering with students can help make our message more effective and more impactful. I think I've done a good job engaging students and lobbying legislators, but I think we can also be helpful in promoting the university to the public. So I encourage my Regent colleagues to meet with students on campus whenever possible, and to engage with the student representatives, the statewide student government coordinating group. In addition to students, I hope we also include faculty in this effort. No group is more connected to what's happening on our campuses than our faculty, and we have some of the best faculty in the world throughout the system. They can be valuable partners here as well. In addition to the ideas mentioned by Regent Peterson, there are so many ways for board members to engage. For example, I wrote a letter of support for UW Eau Claire's application to host a national conference on undergraduate research. And I would also like to add that social media nowadays can be very effective. A simple tweet or Facebook post can reach hundreds of people, especially those in my generation. The point is, it doesn't have to be a big public display of support. Sometimes just demonstrating to the campus leadership that the board is engaged and supportive is just enough. Thank you for this opportunity to say a few words.
Instead of limiting the conversation to just the four of us, we'd also like to hear from board members and chancellors about ways that they can positively engage on behalf of the system. So who'd like to engage in the discussion and weigh in with your thoughts on ideas about advocacy and how we can promote the UW system? Regent President Emeritus Milner. See how I did that?
That was good.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you very much. This is timely and this is important. I had an opportunity to go to the AGB meeting in San Francisco this spring, and had an opportunity to sit in on two presentations about the Guardian Initiative. And at the time, I feel keenly about carrying the message to broadly, and the responsibility of regents to carry the message broadly. And what I want, my only comment, I mean, I could say it again, but I won't. But I want to echo what Regent Ring had to say and underscore it. And I want to add one other thing. Yes, now is very important to do this in light of this budget. But frankly, even more important is to do it after the budget. It's to do it all the time. That's part of our responsibility. That's part of the message that we get out. I belong to an organization that makes it is part of the corporate culture to be engaged long before there are ever any problems, because you have to carry the message about what the institution is prior to having to ask for anything. So I would encourage us, yes, it's very important we do it now, particularly for this budget, but we need to continue that. I also would like to, as I said, echo what Regent Ring has said. I've had an opportunity to meet with faculty. I have had an opportunity to meet with student groups over the years. I've had an opportunity to meet with outside groups, Rotary clubs away from my comfort level. And what I have to say is the idea that a regent or some regents come and talk about the importance of the institution, the importance of the system, giving examples, and the benefits to the individuals that are going through is critically important, because it humanizes what this institution is all about, and it humanizes the governing board of the institution. So thank you very much. Thank you for presenting this. This is timely, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Regent Miller. Regent Mueller.
Thank you. And again, thanks to all of you for this presentation. I have a slightly different perspective, because we've been talking almost totally about looking outward and presenting our case to our stakeholders. But I think we also need to shine a light on the work that we do internally. One way to reclaim that trust is to reiterate that we serve as strong stewards of the taxpayer money. And I've been on the board since, for 5 years now. And during that time, we've worked really hard to hire strong leaders and to better oversee our programmatic and business functions and strengthen our oversight. We always need to be responsive and accountable, and I think we've taken steps to do so. Of course, there have been setbacks and negative attention and negative feedback. But actually, as I've grown in this position, that bothers me less, because I think that's a byproduct, a natural consequence of public accountability. And we embrace that, and we're open to it. Let's face it, we oversee the risks inherent with an organization of this size and complexity, and you all know how I worry about that. There are many risks. We heard about them in the meetings that we held earlier today. But we are expected to use our knowledge and our experience for the benefit of our stakeholders. And I believe this initiative is really welcome. It's a welcome opportunity to restate our commitment as regents, to celebrate what we've accomplished, and pledge to engage in constructive debate in the future on how we can further improve. So thank you for letting me share my comments.
Thank you. Any comments from the panel? I would just underscore one element, for all of the advocacy that we have before us, both as part of the budget and as part of our regular duties, so much of what we utilize for those conversations is the good evidence and oversight and financial accountability that is produced by our UW staff. And we have, I think, whether you think about financial oversight, academic oversight, administrative oversight, we have really doubled down on that focus of having high quality data that we can share with people that is factual and it's impactful. And that's really a testament to our staff. So for them, thank you for doing what you did. Regent Klein. Regent Stout.
I'll just make a quick mention. I think, as Chancellor Ford mentioned, sometimes there's disinformation out there. And I've been engaged in some of these conversations. I do it in a self-interested way sometimes, in the sense that I learn a lot for what's on the mind of some of these civic organizations and business in different communities. And sometimes just having those conversations about the work that's getting done, in particular regarding affordability. You have conversations about the Badger Promise, Chancellor Blank's work here at UW-Madison, Sometimes that message hasn't gotten out. As we see, there was a report recently about overall debt dropping down in Wisconsin. I think that's a lot of the work, the hard work that's been done by this board, and I think there's a lot of positive stories. But also that communication back and forth is, for me, very productive to understand what's on the minds of other individuals so I can take it here and advocate on their behalf as well. So I think it's beneficial for us to share our story, because I do believe there is misinformation at times and a lack of an understanding of how we can make education affordable. Again, highlight the Badger Promise here at Madison, but also a great opportunity to learn what's on the minds of folks that are out there that are not inside the academic institutions day in and day out. Thank you.
It's great advice to listen sometimes more than we talk. Regent Jones.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to join the chorus of support for the proposal made by Regents Peterson and Ring. As a board member, I believe we have a responsibility to be advocates, ambassadors, and allies of and for the UW system. That responsibility includes many things, but it certainly includes writing op-ed pieces, attending events, meeting with legislators and community groups. That responsibility also includes the responsibility to listen to comments, to listen to compliments, and to listen to criticisms. And with that frame of mind heading forward, I am delighted to support this proposal.
Other comments, Regent Hall?
We've all been so positive, I don't know what else to say except ditto. And, you know, so often in the media, and I think you have heard me say this, there's always the negative. And there's so much positive that is happening within our schools. The leadership of our universities, you know, I mean, they continue to persevere in the ebb and flows of what happens. And so this does offer us just another opportunity to rethink how we advocate and engage on behalf of our universities. So thank you for the information on this Guardian program, and just for what I believe the UW system and the Board of Regents has already tried to do through our buddy system and just, you know, working closely. So.
Very good. Any other comments? Regent Chris Peterson.
Well, the first time I spoke here, I told you all that you were very well groomed, and after being only at 2 meetings, I am just blown away. I had no idea that there was so much commitment and so much enthusiasm and hard work. When I saw the budget proposal, I showed my husband, and we actually looked at it. I said, look at this, what they have gone through to get to this. So I guess what I'm saying as a new person, I truly can appreciate. It's amazing. I can't believe I'm here. And I thank you guys for all the work that you do and I hope that I can add to the party.
I'm quite confident you will, and I think we'll all owe your husband an apology the next time we see him for having to read the budget. I don't want to prolong the conversation. It appears that we've gotten comments from all the regents. Are there any chancellors that have comments they'd like to make? Certainly wouldn't want to shut that off. Otherwise, we have important business to contend to. I certainly appreciate this panel. You know, as I said from the onset, there are many components of the AGB proposal that we're already doing, and we're doing exceptionally well. This is a bit of an opportunity for us to memorialize the importance of the role that we have and to take advantage of it, not only to be strong advocates, but also be strong listeners. So with that, thank you. Thank you, panel.
Let's give our presenters a round of applause. Thank you, everyone. Now let's turn to item number 5 on our agenda, the budget request. First, some logistics. The law requires the UW system submit a budget request to the state in September, so the governor's office and staff have time to incorporate our ideas into the larger state budget, which is typically announced in February. As part of that process, three components we need to approve today: the biennial operating, or GPR budget, the biennial capital budget, and several important statutory changes. As we begin today's discussion, I want to thank my fellow regents for a high level of interest and engagement on this complex issue. This is only the first phase of our efforts to advocate for the university and our upcoming budget. We have a great deal of work ahead of us, which includes building support among local leaders, communities, businesses, and citizens. The message we ask our stakeholders to communicate to the legislature is very clear. The UW system is the economic engine that drives our economy, and now is the right time to invest. Following our actions this afternoon, the operating budget request and capital budget request will be submitted to both the Department of Administration and to the Governor's Office. I will now turn to President Cross, who will introduce our budget proposal. President Cross, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Regent President Bailing. The proposed 2019-21 biennial budget request we will outline today contains what we believe is a reasonable request for state investment. So let me remind everyone of the four key components of this operational biennial budget request. First, tuition is generally covered in this budget. Performance-based funding, capacity building funding, and accountability and authority. In case you're wondering, that's a new name for flexibilities. There are two related factors that are not a part of our operational budget request: financial aid and employee compensation. The board already approved the financial aid request in June because that is part of the Higher Education Aids Board budget, not ours. Within the state budget, employee compensation adjustments come from the state compensation reserve, not our budget. Except, the little asterisk here, except the state only pays 70% of the UW's pay plan amounts. That creates a problem for us. So there are three or so key facts that connect tuition to compensation, and I want to mention those. First, each % increase in tuition potentially generates about $8 million given current enrollment, based on those current enrollment levels. A tuition increase tied to CPI, or roughly 2.5% at this point, would then generate about $40 million over the biennium. Second, when the state passes a pay plan for the UW system, 30% of that funding for that pay plan traditionally comes from tuition, not from the state's compensation reserve. A compensation increase of 2.5%, CPI at a minimum, tied to the rate of inflation would amount to a cost to the system of about $30 million. If you put these two scenarios together, there is a potential impact to the system and to the institutions of about $70 million over the biennium. For these reasons, even though compensation technically is not part of our budget, we put that before the board in December, as most of you know. We'll do that at then. Please know that we will aggressively be asking for your support to ask the state to provide 100% of compensation increase, not just 70, in December. We'll need your help to do that. Further, we will continue to monitor various factors that impact competitive wages, including fluctuations in CPI, among other things. Remember, we're trying to predict what CPI will be like next July. We'll be working on that for over the next several months. In this budget request, we're also seeking some statutory changes to provide the university with regulatory relief for several of our previous biennial budgets. We have been seeking authority for project management and program revenue bonding. The board has supported those efforts, and we have been working closely with DOA and others to achieve this authority, and we are very pleased with the progress of those discussions. So at this time, given that background, I will turn the floor over to Sean Nelson, Vice President for Finance, to provide more specific details on this operating budget request. Sean?
Thank you, President Cross, and good afternoon, Regents. As President Cross noted, we just want to highlight sort of where we are at in the budget development process. So at the last meeting in June, we discussed the financial aid recommendation as it relates to the Wisconsin grant. And further on in December, we'll be taking up compensation, but we will be discussing both of those here today. Today's meeting, we will be focusing on the operating budget funding request around outcomes-based funding and the capacity building initiatives. Further, we will discuss tuition authorities and accountabilities and some of the other compulsory requirements that we have to submit to DOA around standard budget adjustments, performance measures, and statutory reporting. I'll then turn it over to Alex and Rob to discuss capital after my presentation. Again, on the financial aid piece, so at the June meeting, the board did approve funding to bring the Wisconsin grant up to the FY10 award level. That was a request of $6.5 million, bringing that average grant up to about $2,160. Subsequent to that board meeting, I did present to HEAB, and they accepted that recommendation, and they will forward that request on as part of their submission next month. On the compensation piece, I think as President Cross noted, this is not to be recommended today, but we will have a final recommendation to the board in December. So you know, this is the first year of the 2+2 pay plan. We had 2% implemented on July 1st of 2018. The second 2% will take effect on January 1st. We are currently have a study underway to benchmark faculty and staff salaries against peers. We know some of the latest analysis we've seen through 2017 shows us at about 17–18% below our peers in terms of compensation. So the initial recommendation today is for a minimum of CPI plus CPI, so 2.5 plus 2.5% over the next biennium. And again, we'll have that final recommendation to the board at the December meeting. Just to dig down a little bit more into President Cross's point about how employee compensation is funded, historically it has been 70% supported through the state GPR and 30% through tuition. Naturally, without a tuition hike, campuses have had to absorb that percentage increase. And I'll say, for this current pay plan, campuses have been on the hook for about $15 million in FY19 alone. And you see here, if we were to ask, this is a scenario, if we were to ask for CPI plus CPI, it'd be a total cost of $103 million. So if our request were to be fully fund pay plan, that is the amount we're looking at, the $103 million for the next biennium. On tuition, we're not recommending an increase in resident tuition at this time. While statutes grant the Board of Regents the authority to set tuition and fees, the tuition freeze has been legislatively mandated since 2013-15 through provisions in the biennial budget bills. Again, as President Cross noted, an increase tied to CPI would generate about $40 million in revenue over the next biennium. I wanted to resurrect this slide again. I presented this at the June meeting in relation to the annual budget. I think this is a very important graphic for folks to understand. So since the tuition freeze from FY13 through FY18, we have reduced tuition balances by $250 million over that time. You will note that FY18 actually has a slight uptick. That is largely attributable to system balances. Overall, campus balances are down about 7.8 million, thereabouts. As you see, we've also made a projection for the end of FY19. We project to be down about $254 million in tuition balances. Now, I also want to draw your attention to that sort of dotted line there. That's the 12% reporting threshold. That is Regent Policy 21-6, the Program Revenue Guidelines and Fund Balances Policy. That is really our best proxy for assessing what a prudent level of reserves are for the campuses. And I can tell you right now, as of the close of FY18, we have 8 of 13 campuses below that 12% threshold. And that number will increase as we look towards 19. So I'd be derelict in my responsibility if I did not draw attention to this, because I think over time, we will need to supplant some of these expenses with new revenue. And when it's not tuition, we're going to need to look at some of the operating investments that we're considering today. In terms of specific biennial budget recommendations, we want to focus on two areas: the outcomes-based funding and on the capacity building initiatives. First, on the outcomes-based funding, so the Regents will know that this is the first year of outcomes-based funding, FY19. We received $26.25 million in this current biennium. Those funds will be allocated out to the campuses in October. As we know, I think the 4 goals established by the legislature, I'll cite them here: growing and ensuring student success, improving and excelling at student programs and progress and completion, expanding contributions to the workforce, and enhancing operational efficiency and effectiveness. In support of each of these legislative goals, we developed 4 metrics to support those goals, and they're in your board document today. I won't go through them in greater detail. This model was approved by the board in December of 2017 and subsequently by the Joint Finance Committee last April. And I'll just further add that future performance measures, which is a requirement in the DOA submission, will be based on outcomes-based goals. So we know there's a huge intersection between the performance measures that we've been reporting on for several or many years and the new outcomes-based goals. In fact, the outcomes-based goals are actually more granular and address several other areas of accountability that are of interest to system and the campuses. In terms of investment, we're seeking a 27.5 in year 1 and then an additional 27.5 in year 2 for a total biennial investment of $82.5 million. This is an increase over the 26.25 to reflect UW extension being part of the model in future iterations. We will still need to define some new metrics, but I know that that work is ongoing with the folks at OPART, System, and through the central office. Capacity building initiative. So this is a new initiative from President Cross, a request out to the campuses to solicit proposals that were in alignment with UW's system and/or key state priorities. We received a broad array of proposals from the campus. I think we had 60 or so overall. And they were in accordance with what we set out, and that is under system priorities, focus on transfers, internships, improving graduation rates, retention, and affordability. And on state priorities, a focus on workforce development, retain and attract talent, entrepreneurship and innovation, and again, affordability. We have proposals that touch all of these areas. In fact, many others beyond this. We did have a couple of themes emerge from that process, primarily around high impact practices and student success. I won't go through these, but student advising was popular, adding some undergraduate research opportunities. On the workforce side, increasing capacity in graduates and healthcare professions. We saw other areas, though. We saw some proposals in data analytics and in computer science. Green Bay had an interesting proposal on addressing mental health issues and so forth. So I think we have that level of detail for the Regents. It'd be very interesting for folks to poke through and see what we've been addressing. But we thought that going forward, we'd try and package these in a way that would make sense in terms of the initial priorities that we set out, and that will resonate with folks across the UW system and at the Capitol. In terms of overall investment for capacity building initiatives, we are seeking a second-year funding appropriation of $25 million. So this would be recurring revenue, not one-time revenue, but happening in the second year of the biennium. So if we take a look at the overall summary in terms of our request on the outcomes-based funding, again, $82.5 million total for the biennium. That's $27.5 in each of the 2 years. And then finally, on the capacity building side, $25 million in year 2 of the biennium for a total operating budget investment request of $107.5 million. Now, how does that stack up with where we are today? So the first bar chart there is our current budget, the 2018-19 budget. That first investment in year 1 would be an increase of about 2.4%. And then the year-over-year increase from 2021 over 1920 is an additional 4.7%, for a 7.1% increase over the biennium. On the authorities and accountability side, as President Cross mentioned, our old flexibilities bucket, we have several legislative changes that are in your document, but we most notably want to note the program revenue bonding and project management. To date, we've had some positive interaction with our partners at DOA. We're hopeful to make some progress on this issue over the coming biennium. We do have some other required budget detail that we must submit as part of our request. State statutes do require additional requirements for state agencies, including submission of a few areas. We need to submit a flat budget request. Secondly, a 5% reduction plan. And then finally, a new one this year, a base budget review. We'll be doing all of that activity centrally. This is not additional work for the campuses. We have traditionally executed those from system. The biennial budget resolution also seeks authority for President Cross to approve and submit the above items. So we'll be conducting a lot of work in these areas over the next few months, and we'll be seeking your authority to delegate that responsibility to approve it to President Cross. I think with that, I can take some questions on the budget, and then, yeah, we can move on.
Go ahead. Regents, questions for Sean Nelson? Regent Evers.
Just one, and I just want to verify what I think I heard, that it would cost $30 million to fund the compensation plan and $40 million to additional to fund the freeze, $70 million.
Yeah, that's accurate. Yeah.
I would express that two ways. 40 million is in lost revenue, 30 million is in expense.
Regent Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Sean, thank you for your presentation and all the work that's gone into this. But when I've been out on the campuses, what I hear most from the chancellors is the need to have salary increases because we are falling behind our peers. And I guess I was somewhat surprised that we didn't have a decision item that spoke directly to that right now as part of our budget request, not passively waiting for whatever pay plan we might get. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, in our recommendation, we do say a minimum of CPI plus CPI is our initial recommendation at this point. But I think there's still some more work that needs to happen over the next few months to study this in greater detail. We could certainly refine that ask as we come to the December meeting.
I know President Cross would like to respond to that question as well. Go ahead, President Cross.
I think the timing issue is important to us. Right now, I don't know what CPI will be next year, but it could be 3 or even higher percent. I don't know. Or it could be less. So it's difficult to predict what we want to ask. So we're trying to wait to the last minute before we put that forward, Regent Mueller. Be advised, though, that's our highest priority. That clearly is our highest priority. There's no question. And we will be seeking full funding for that, not just 70% of that. And that would be an additional $103 million if it was only CPI.
And President Cross, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we plan on taking that up in the December meeting, correct?
It's at the December board. That's when we normally do that. I think last year we briefed you on what we wanted at this point, but this year the COLA is moving around on us, and we're not really sure. The last I looked, it was 2.13 or something like that, and I think it's going to be higher than that.
And Sean, just as a reminder to members of the board, I don't think I had any control of that. The pursuit of additional funding for the pay plan will be through the compensation reserve fund, and that's where that full funding request from us will go. And that's why it's more germane to do it in December. I think I was making notes. You said you're doing peer college benchmarking to identify where we stack up against our peers. And I think the anecdote that you said was we're about 15% below. So that work still needs to be done by your office. And then to President Cross's point, CPI is moving around. You'd anticipate, well, your office and others, you'd anticipate that that could be a higher number than the lapse of 30.
That's right.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
Go ahead, President Cross.
I actually think, I really appreciate your point, because I think that's the issue that puts us most at risk, is the pay plan. So a point to that, we may be asking the board for more than CPI, and I think that's kind of realistic. But what might that look like? It may be a combination of 2 or even 3 packages where there's a minimum of CPI, then there's a merit package or some package on top of that. So we don't know yet.
Regents, other questions? Regent Atwell.
Regent President Bailing, I believe I gave you a heads up. I want to talk a little bit about tuition. Is this the appropriate time?
You know, why don't we see if there's any other questions yet for Vice President Sean Nelson, and then I could get a resolution on the floor, and I think that'd be the right time to take up that discussion.
Thank you.
So any other questions for Vice President Nelson?
Sean, just a clarifying question, and I think you and I went through this a little bit. When, the last biennium, we had several moving parts. You had some cost to continue dollars that came back in. You had our performance metric funding increases. We had some innovation dollars. But I think as I stacked that up, it was like 26 million in new performance metric dollars. I think that 5 million in innovation was kind of one-time newfound investment. And then there were 3 or 4 other cats and dogs. But the total new investment in system operating budget last year, or last biennium, in the 35 to 40 range?
It was north of that, actually, yeah. I think we're up around close to 60 million for the
60.
biennium. Yeah.
Okay.
We can get that number too.
No, that's
but yeah,
helpful. Well, I think that's just helpful in comparison to where we sit today.
I'm not sure that was 60 million, though. I think it was closer to 36. The 60 million may have included some other things that were not a part of the operating budget.
Included 1 year of the 50 at 25.
Something like that.
Correct.
Yeah,
So that's clean. But nevertheless, true new dollars in, I think, was about 36, which I think is instructive for the board.
Other questions for Vice President Nelson? If not, I'm going to go ahead and excuse our Vice President Nelson. Know that I'll just make a quick editorial after serving on the board now for 6 years. I'd like to thank Vice President Sean Nelson, Rob Kramer, and Alex Rowe. I feel like this budget was put together in the best format that I've seen yet to date, and so do our 3 lead staff members on that. Thank you very much. It was very, very well done. So, to start off the discussion, if I could have a motion for resolution number 5.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on the operating budget. Regents, who'd like to go first? Regent Ring.
Yeah, I just have a comment. I think, echoing what Regent President Bailing just said, I think this is a very good budget in terms of at least student success. Outcomes-based funding for campuses, as well as the capacity initiative. I think, in the coming years, if this is approved, I think that the students will definitely feel the impact of it, and I think it'll be a very positive one. So with that, I'm in full support of this operating budget.
Thank you, Regent Ring. Other regents? Regent Atwell.
Thank you. I'm a relatively new regent, 15 months. This is my first biennial budget, and I'm kind of offering some comments as trying to dig in and figure out what's really going on here. And I also don't want to belabor the point, but I want to remind everybody, I think I have some special status by virtue of having paid more tuition dollars than anyone else around the table, which includes 5 graduates of the system and 2 currently enrolled. So I've been paying tuition since 2001, pretty much continually. And I want to say first about that I think I've gotten every dollar's worth of that. And I recognize that my means might permit me to be less tuition elastic than people otherwise would be. I'm sensitive to that. The most, I think, distressing thing in my first period as a regent is some strong misinformation that's present out there that I think has resulted in the tuition freeze being kept on maybe longer than it should. And I guess what I think we really need to do, because I notice in this budget we're not asking the legislature to essentially restore the statutory authority we have to set tuition. I firmly believe that's something we need to get done. And I also firmly believe that we've got to dispel some of the myths that are out there about how the system is being funded and governed. Sean Nelson, in his presentation, the chart that shows the flow of funds, that's on page 7 in my packet, I don't know what it is here, but it's extremely illuminating, and I wish that everyone, I wish my older kids who make statements like, I don't know why the legislature is so involved in the university, they only pay for 17% of it. You know, in reality, when you strip out the flow-through dollars, it's about a $2.4 billion operation that is 60% tuition funded and 40% funded essentially by state resources. So we've got to get these ideas that are out there corrected. With respect to the tuition, so I want to comment specifically on the tuition and the way we talk about reserves. The tuition freeze, I understand how it came about. As a citizen, I looked at it. We'd seen this run up in tuition, 5.1% average increases over a number of years. And Sean, the only beef I have with you is you still don't have me that chart that goes back before 2013 that shows the tuition balances rising as we were essentially charging more tuition than we needed in the current period. And I think from a legislative point of view, that was fairly distressing because it seemed to indicate a buildup. What are those? I remember asking you, John, what is that reserve? Is it cash somewhere? I mean, I'm a banker. Is it cash? What it really amounts to, as I understand it, is the authority to spend money outside of the current budgetary cycle. And I'm sure someone will correct Regent Atwell if he wants to restate this, but there was this buildup of this reserve that was sort of outside the biennial process, and it certainly appeared unnecessary and kind of excessive. So we get a tuition freeze to say you got to stop doing that. And over time, we have essentially, I don't think it's true that we've gutted the system. We've essentially funded the freeze by alternate means, specifically performance funding and more so from the drawdown of these reserves. So I do think we've arrived at a point where whatever point the legislature wanted to make has been made. And I think it's not in the best interest of the people of Wisconsin to leave inelastic tuition dollars, by which I mean, would it make a great deal of difference to me if I had to pay more tuition on behalf of my 2 sons that are currently enrolled in the system? I realize it would make a difference to some people. It's not going to change my lifestyle, and I would consider it a value. So I think we're walking away from those resources, and we're really not saving the taxpayers' money. We're actually channeling it back through other means. So I think we got our work to do. I definitely think the tuition freeze, whatever policy purpose it served has been fulfilled. I guess I've been assured that prudentially it's not the proper time to approach the legislature on that topic, as that neither party in general is going to want to stand up and vote for raising people's tuition in an election year. I'm interested in policy. I'm thankful I don't have to run for office. I'm grateful for the people who do. I know it's difficult, and this is how our process works. But I'm interested in the policy, and I'm interested in the communication of that policy. And I think we need those resources. I think they can be used. I think it's foolish to walk away from those dollars, and I really want to urge us to go to work on making the case, if it's not in this biennial budget soon, to do that. And I think to illuminate, still a little, I think we talk about a 12% guideline on the balances or the reserves. I don't know where that number comes from. What I do know is that actually none of the campuses actually have a corporate existence, so, and they don't actually have a cash reserve. It's sort of a stored ability to spend. So why don't we just peg the reserve amount and focus on the biennial budget. So I guess what I'm suggesting in summary is we need to clarify what reserves are and what they aren't, and do a better job of communicating that in the public. We need to do a better job of explaining it. The university has not been gutted. The people of Wisconsin are investing heavily. We're asking them to continue to invest heavily. And we have, I think, a $1.2 billion capital budget, which also represents resources of the people of Wisconsin that we're looking to invest. I agree with all the information that it's a tremendous investment. It has been for my family. But we need to do a better job because I, like many of you, lived through the 2009-10 period. And in my case, I dealt with hundreds of companies that saw their revenue go down 30%. And cuts then meant cuts. It didn't mean I didn't get the resources I wanted. It meant I got to take 20, 30, 40% out of my cost structure. Very difficult to do. So I don't like to be the dour banker. I think we have an awesome opportunity. And I know we're working at gaining efficiency and effectiveness across the system. But I think when you look at what's happening with hospitals, when you look at what's happening in municipalities, school districts, yes, we need resources. Yes, education is a great investment, but we owe it to ourselves to push harder on gaining efficiency and to really focus resources, not just where they have an economic impact, because I care about the liberal arts. I'm not just interested in the economic outcome. I'm grateful for it. So I want to see us work on lifting the tuition freeze, clarifying what reserves are, better explaining to the public the investment we're making. I'm anxious to be part of that in line with the comments that we've had. And I look forward to a time when the state can work better together instead of spreading disinformation, give one story out there. So thank you for indulging my commentary, and I trust you'll hear more from me later on it.
Thank you, Regent Atwell. Regent Klein.
Regent Atwell, I just want to say I agree with you, and it's very interesting to me in coming on the Board of Regents. I think I've been on now for 2 or 3 years, but I think governance is more than just being a booster or being a guardian. I also think it means oversight, and I think we've done an excellent job as a board of really looking at what's going on with this budget and really understanding it. But there may be at some point that there is the right time to say, return the tuition-making authority back to this board. We're capable of doing it. We're watching the resources and how much money is being spent on different things, and we aren't building up reserves unnecessarily. And I think that's our story, and I think that deserves being said. I think the other question I've asked is, what is the appropriate level of reserves? And that would be something that I think we should, as an oversight board, look at some point. Because we have now drawn them down for a couple of years. Early on, it seemed like they kept going up, even despite the tuition freeze. But now they've gone down. So it might be appropriate to say, what do we think we would recommend to the legislature on this point? My second last point is peer group on salaries. I think that is an important data point for us as we go into December, because when I got on this board, I said the biggest thing for me is students. And so I think we have to have fair compensation for the people that are teaching our students, so we keep good people in those positions and maintain our quality. And last but not least, strategic enrollment initiatives. We've got, we're doing the restructure. I didn't see in the priorities looking at how we're going to increase enrollment in our universities in our different campuses, and I think that's going to be critical. I think we heard that in David Ward's remarks, and I think it also is just, very clear to me that we're going to need a very, our workforce is dwindling. We need more trained and educated people in our state to take on these jobs, and that will help our economy. So we ought to be focusing this board on how are we increasing enrollment. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Klein. Regent Evers.
Thank you. And I just want to begin this short dialogue or short conversation about, under no circumstances, my comments that will follow have anything to do with me making sure I continue to advocate for the system. And I will continue to do that. However, I think the time is now, frankly, in this budget. And that's why I am going to vote against it. I know I was actually thinking of offering a separate amendment, but I don't want to go through Robert's Rules of Order and all that stuff. I'll just make a comment. I think $70 million should be added to the GPR expectations. The state of Wisconsin needs to invest more adequately in the University of Wisconsin system. Tuition freeze is a reality. The governor has made that a priority, and it's been a priority in the past, and we've seen how that played out. But if we expect to do what people have said around the table about making sure that staff are adequately compensated, to make sure that the freeze is funded, I believe that the time is now to make that ask. And $70 million, and I think that's exactly where we should be. Because at the end of the game, if that doesn't happen, if it plays out in ways that we feel that it could very well play out, we will once again be pitting needs of students against and tuition needs against the health of the system. So I think the time is now to make that happen. I think the budget should be transparent around that issue and frankly honest. And I think an additional $70 million is needed. It was told, that's exactly why I asked that question before. So I don't believe the budget does accomplish that. It has nothing to do with my love for the system or anything else like that. The bottom line is I don't think this is a truthful budget of what our needs are. I will oppose it. I will continue to be a strong advocate for the system going forward, but I think this budget does not make the cut in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Evers. Regent Milner.
In 2012, the first vote I took, the first significant vote I took was a 5.5 increase in tuition. And at that time, I actually said I'm relying on my colleagues around the board to have made the inquiries that this is the appropriate amount, and I certainly hoped it would be that case, because for most of us sitting around the board, 5.5 didn't seem like that much, but if you take a look around the state, 5.5 is significant. Particularly as I grew in the job, I came to understand that the 5.5 was a culmination of, what, 78% over a short period of time. Right now, I'm feeling a bit differently than I did 6 months after I took that vote. I have never particularly opposed the freeze because I felt that it was necessary that we take a serious look at what the reserves were and that we seriously took a look at the financial form of the system and also of individual campuses. And sometimes you need to be between the rock and the hard place to make hard decisions. Right now, a couple things concern me. Number one, the 12% reserves. I'm concerned about that. We're running how many billion-dollar business? Reserves mean something. You need to have reserves. That's one of the reasons that as a state agency, we're allowed to retain reserves, because we have a unique type of state agency. So I'm concerned about that. I agree that this might not be the year to fight that battle. All right. There's a second reason, though. And the second reason is a little bit different than funding the freeze, which is, I think, what the idea of the additional $70 million references. And that's that we need to take a serious look at what the cost of education is and what the contribution needs to be made from families and students reasonably, and I mean reasonably. I don't think that was I don't think it was a good communication before, and I don't think it was reasonable. Too much was put on the backs too quickly of families and students, and I didn't like that at the time. But right now, if you take a look at CPI, which is going to be going up in the coming years, and you take a look at the cost of the education, the fact it's been frozen now for, what, 6 years, then it's time for us to take a serious look, and perhaps, maybe now this is not the time, and the time is coming that we need to prepare ourselves to make that stand, that this is not challenging the families across the state, but this is something that's important for the families to make the contribution, but also for us to take a look at this seriously, at the financial resources that we're putting into this institution. So we just had a great presentation about what our role as Regents should be. And perhaps in the coming 2 years, that might be part of the guardianship initiative that we undertake either as current or past regents, is to take a serious look at a responsible management of what the tuition costs will be. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Milner. Other regents? Regent Vice President Peterson.
So just a couple of comments. I think we're starting to wind towards a resolution here. You know, I would say I've had more exposure to building a budget this time around than in past times. It is very difficult to do. It's important for us to think about the optics of what's in front of us and what are the potential tools that are available to us. I think we're at a very unique opportunity where I think we've actually done a very good job changing the discourse towards should we be reinvesting in education in our state, not just K through 12, but K through 20. And the focus on higher education, I think, is going to be more profound now than it's been quite likely in the last decade. I think this is a very aggressive budget, a very assertive budget, but not an abrasive budget. When I think about and confirmed with Sean Nelson what our investments were last year, which were the best investments from an operating perspective we've seen in quite some time, it was about $36 million. When I think about the focus that we've utilized to focus on performance metrics as an element of ensuring that we're making good investments on our campuses, I think we're putting a very strong foot forward with the numbers that we're requesting here. Again, I think they're aggressive, but I don't think they're abrasive. I think we're investing heavily in capacity building, which is important, in STEM-related fields that I'll be absolutely comfortable taking criticism that we're making additional growth and movement in those areas. The preponderance of our focus is on liberal arts, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But as we see a reinvestment in STEM, I think that is going to be very compelling for those that build this next budget. So when I look at the total amount, a 7% increase, I think that's very responsible on our part. I think that we're going to have a very aggressive push for full compensation come December. I think this board, I know the leadership, I know President Cross is committed to making that request and trying to fulfill it. And I agree with you, Regina, and Regent Klein and Regent Atwell that, you know, a discussion about what are the priorities and what are the responsibilities of this board needs to be front and center. This takes an inordinate amount of time for all of us, and you want to feel like you're making a difference. I'm quite confident we can make good judgments on what appropriate increases are to our operating budget, to our capital budget, to our tuition setting processes. You know, for all of the responsibilities that come with this position, I think there also has to be an expectation of trust that we, I think, have done a great job of rehabilitating with our colleagues in the legislature and the executive branch, but that conversation needs to continue. And the totality of this budget and this budget recommendation, I think we've gone to very good lengths to look at the tools at our disposal to put forward the best budget that is going to be advantageous for our students, our faculty, our staff, and our citizens.
Thank you, Regent Vice President Peterson. Other regents, Regent Stile.
Thank you. I think this is an appropriate funding request, and I like it because the request is tied directly to outcomes and goal attainment. It sets up an operation to prepare students for the jobs of the future. It continues to drive the system towards efficiency on how we deliver the educational product, and I think the focus on driving graduation rates higher is appropriate, so I think it's an appropriate request.
Thank you, Regent Stile. Regent Delgado.
I'll premise my words by saying that I never met a good teacher that was overpaid. Okay. The second item is I don't know much about teaching, but I know a heck of a lot about going to school. I went to 2 grammar schools, 4 high schools, 4 universities, and I have 3 university degrees. So from the perspective of the student, I have a lot of experience. Okay, I support the budget, and I want to tell you that when I first came, the first budget I saw was two pieces of paper. And I told President Cross that this is my first meeting. I'm not saying much. I'm going to propose it. Next year, you'll have a riot. If you think we're going to approve this kind of money with 2 pieces of paper, that's crazy. I'm going to say that the budget that we have right now is the best, as well explained as I have seen. And my third premise is I have seen a lot of budgets. A lot. And I have cut a lot of budgets, have expanded a lot of budgets, and have worked with a lot of budgets. And when I come to a budget, this is the way it goes. These are the funds that we have been given. And I think the budget should reflect what we intend to do in the business. The business of education is a very important business to the state. And when we adjust the business to the budget, what we have to realize is that we are a bit of a crossroad here in many ways, but we have to make sure we compensate our professors, and we have to make sure that we make it possible for our students, as experienced as students, to afford to go to school. We have to highlight the value of the education. Actually, we have to make sure that it's in the mind of parents and students, because I find many parents and students who do not appreciate it, I'm sorry to say. And I can say I'm the poster child for the value of education, okay? Benefited from it tremendously, and my parents didn't pay a penny for my university education, all right? So the point I'm saying is that we have many variables going on and many things to balance, but from my perspective, I'm highlighting the importance of the student, which is where I have the most experience, and I'm focusing on it. We have proceeded with a variety of initiatives, increasing the 4-year graduation and finding ways in which we can, in fact, make it possible for people to be within their budget, to be able to live and get a tuition. The other thing which I think is terribly important this university system has begun to do is to make sure that we encourage the employers of the state to give employment to our students. This is a very broad view. I approve this budget because there's no perfect budget, okay? But we will continue working on it with, in my mind, with a very clear view on the impact on the family and the student while taking care of the other things. My impression is that we have taken a lot of initiatives, and we are continuing to take initiatives that is going to help us to look at a different variety of important factors here. But we cannot just focus on one or two. Okay, and I think we're not. I think we're doing it, we're trying to do it very well. I am very willing to explain the value of what we're doing to the legislature and the governor. I'm very, very willing to advocate for a bigger share of the income of the state, and I'm very willing to adjust to what the legislature decides they're going to give us. But I want them to know the consequences of not having enough. If the consequences are acceptable, then I think we have to manage within those consequences. And I don't want to go any further on that because we haven't gotten there yet, okay?
Thank you, Regent Delgado. Regent Tyler.
When I seconded this resolution, I thought that was probably enough said, but as time has gone on, I guess I've got more to say. The company that I have is not a high-tech company. When we started 30 years ago, high school graduates were enough. That's not the case anymore. Even though we still are not a high-tech company, we're working across the world. We had teams in Germany recently, and I'm telling you, generally speaking, the United States is far behind Europe when it comes to technology integration, and I don't know anything about Asia, but I suspect the same is true there. I think we're probably behind. So somehow we've got to catch up, and I think that, I know a lot of work is being done in our K-12 system, and I know a lot of work is being done in our technical colleges, and I know a lot of work is being done at the universities. This is a big ask, but I think that this ask is appropriate considering where the educational needs are to support the employers of the state. I mean, if we, along with Indiana, are the manufacturing state, and if we're going to be competitive in the future, we're going to have to up our game. You know, I think this budget, along with the capital request, ups our game. And if we don't move in this direction, I would say we're probably not honoring the responsibility that we have to the people of this state. I mean, do we need to up our enrollments? We absolutely do. I think that, you know, and I think that's true at the technical colleges as well. And we do a great job of graduating folks at K-12. We need to get higher learning into that earlier, and we need to partner more with the colleges, with the tech colleges, and with K-12. And we've got to up our game all across the board. Otherwise, we're not going to be competitive in the world. And so, I believe strongly in that, and I think that even though this is a big ask, I think it's an appropriate ask.
Thank you, Regent Tyler. Regent Mueller.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I can't let this resolution pass without bringing special attention to item 3, which relates to the capital bonding and project management. I know it was mentioned briefly in Sean Nelson's comments, but when I've been out on the campuses, I've heard two things. One, I already mentioned that chancellors plead with us to provide additional compensation because there's faculty and staff are falling behind their peers. I also hear pleas that we be given PR bonding authority, program revenue bonding authority, and program management. This is a big, big change, and I just feel we need to acknowledge it. I am a little concerned about what kind of staff we're going to need to do this, how that's going to work. I think we have to have a lot of discussions about that. I've had conversations with staff already who indicate to me we're not going to replicate the Department of Administration finance office, but there's still a lot of work to be done. I'm very supportive of this point 3 in this very important motion, but just a cautionary note to my colleagues that there's a lot, if this is approved by the legislature, it'll be a fundamental change in how we operate and will require attention.
Thank you, Regent Mueller. Regent Hall, go ahead.
You know, I have to say something, correct? So I do support this budget. I think it's another step in the right direction. At the same time, when we spoke about affordability, there are still so many students and families that don't know some of the financial support options that are out here. And as I just work in my day job, there are still students and families who have not been able to take advantage of our system. And so I think there's still work for us to do in terms of just getting information out about the importance of higher ed, but also that there are some opportunities for support to go on to school. The other piece around, compensation, I agree with going forth and, identifying how we can make a movement in that area in December. Because we do lose staff not only in higher ed, but in K through 12. Compensation continues to be an issue for one of the hardest jobs, I think, in our country, but one of the key jobs in our country. And to Regent Atwell's point about it being time to probably approach our legislators again about the stance that we need to be able to take as the Board of Regents and just as a state. It is time because we cannot fall behind and we have to look at ways to keep improving higher ed. But good budget, I believe, and thank you for all the work that's been done.
Thank you, Regent Hall. Any other regents wish to speak to resolution number 5, the operating budget? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and proceed to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, and thank you. Now we'll turn to number 6, our biennial capital budget request. President Cross, can you start us off?
Thank you, Regent President Bailing. So let me make just a couple of observations about the next item before the board, the 2019-21 capital budget request and the 6-year plan for 2019 through 2025. Vice President Kramer and Associate Vice President Rowe will address the capital budget in more detail. So I would like to just highlight how the recommendations address 3 critical issues facing the system and the state of Wisconsin. First, as we heard from Dr. Ward, much of the activity, economic activity, takes place around Wisconsin at companies large and small, where our faculty, our staff, and students, our alumni, contribute in many, many ways to the state's economy. The facilities where they do their work matter greatly, and they must be adequate to support the economic engine of this state. Second, the UW system is competing to attract and retain students, faculty, and other employees in an increasingly competitive environment. We need to have programs and facilities that meet the needs of these students. Obsolete chemistry labs, old classrooms, outdated residence halls, and other aged facilities make meeting academic needs and student expectations very difficult. They make it difficult to retain and attract faculty as well. Finally, this is a significant capital request and a plan. We need to be clear about the distinctions between the request and the plan. We're asking you to approve a capital budget request that is focused on the 2019-21 biennium. The remaining 4 years in the plan looks ahead. The University of Wisconsin has served the state for about 170 years, and the UW system will continue to serve the state for many, many more years to come. The investments we make now will carry this university far into the future. It is also true that the investments we fail to make will impact our future as well. To more fully outline the capital budget request, I turn to Vice President Rob Kramer and Associate Vice President Alex Rowe. Rob?
Thank you, President Cross. Good afternoon, everyone. Before I speak to the capital budget, I would like to thank Associate Vice President Rowe, her team, many of whom I think are here, and the many campus persons who contributed to developing the projects and plans we're reviewing. Countless hours were spent in analyzing facility and program needs and developing capital projects. Regent President Bailing and others have commented on the thoughtful, high-quality work put into these recommendations, and I want to extend my appreciation to those involved. One of the exciting and challenging aspects of capital planning is preparing facilities for the academic and program needs of today and tomorrow. The work that we do over the next several years through instructional space renovations and construction of new facilities prepares our campuses for teaching and research for the future. Neglecting these will relegate a generation of students to subpar learning environments, such as trying to master the engineering, chemistry, and biology knowledge of 2025 in labs built before 1975. Let me try to put the capital budget request into some context. The board currently operates 62 million square feet of space. This makes up 2/3 of the state of Wisconsin's total space. This is a significant asset with a replacement value of over $13 billion. Arguably the state's largest single asset, and we are responsible for preserving and maintaining this public asset. The biennial budget request is for $1.4 billion in projects in 2019-21, with another $549 million requested now for 21-23. The capital plan totals $3.6 billion in all funds. This proposed plan reflects our remarkable facilities, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It is a large 6-year plan based on our facilities, their age, and their condition. Another bit of context is the funding provided in the past for capital projects. As President Cross noted, capital planning and budgeting is a long-term endeavor. The last two capital budgets provided modest funding for UW facilities. The 2015 to 17 and the 2017 to 19 board requests called for about $440 million in general fund supported borrowing every 2 years and about $326 million in program revenue supported borrowing every 2 years. This capital request returns us to those levels. It moves the average for a 10-year cycle, 2015 to 17 through 2023 to 25, to about $500 million in general fund supported borrowing and about $300 million in program revenue supported borrowing each biennium. It moves us right back to the funding levels identified in 2015-17 as our target. My final point is that facilities exist in the context of academic and other programs. Our facilities reflect the academic programs at our campuses, student services and activities, the supporting infrastructure, and the other operations needed to keep these small cities functioning day to day. Campuses, communities, the state, and the board have demonstrated a strong interest in expanding STEM programs statewide. This means providing modern labs, support spaces, research areas, and infrastructure. These are key components of our capital plan. As Associate Vice President Rowe will explain in more detail, the capital budget request and plan focus on maintenance, instructional spaces, key STEM facilities, and deferred auxiliary projects. She will also review several management activities designed to improve the delivery of capital projects and improve the accuracy of our project budgets. Thank you very much.
So good afternoon. I realize that my team has attained the designation of the least sustainable budget document you've ever seen. So, however, we felt it was important that we give you some visuals and some flavor of the nature of the work that goes into the capital budget. The University of Wisconsin's 2019-21 capital budget recommendation is designed to address the ongoing capital needs of the system through the following key strategic elements: affordability, elimination of obsolete facilities, repairing aging facilities, expanding STEM education, and promoting improved planning. As a follow-on to comments stated by President Cross and Vice President Kramer, our number one priority is to improve our largest asset. And so to accomplish this, we have prioritized renovation over new and directed resources to high-impact teaching and learning, living and support activities to meet the needs of our nearly 40,000 faculty and staff and our 174,000 students so they can meet and exceed their potential. Our 2019-21 capital plan is comprised of 25 projects and programs, which reflects the strategic priorities I just mentioned. Overall, more than 3/4 of the projects recommended align with the stated priorities. In total, there are 59 projects listed in our 6-year plan. I'm going to start the presentation by speaking briefly about the current state of our facilities. As has been mentioned, we have more than 1,400 buildings, which our institutions routinely rate in 2 categories: physical condition, what is the state of the building, based on a scale of 1 to 7, or good to termination; functional condition, how does the building meet the programmatic needs of its occupants, on a scale of 1 to 6, excellent and highly suited to inappropriate. There is a snapshot of the individual ratings on each project's executive summary page for your reading pleasure. Just as an overview, nearly 50% of our inventory is categorized as moderate to inappropriate termination for physical building condition. This scattergram demonstrates both the physical and functional rating of the projects included in the biennial request. The light blue represents the functional rating, which I just described. So that's the 1 to 6. And the dark blue, the physical condition, the 1 to 7. The farther from the center of the circle the color goes, the worse off the physical and programmatic functions are. There are technically 3 colors, green, yellow, and red, but as you can see, most of the projects included in the budget recommendation are either considered fair determination for physical condition and functionally conditional to inappropriate. If you direct your attention to the upper left at 21 River Falls Hagstead Hall, you can see that the functional rating for the building is unsatisfactory and the physical condition is termination. We are recommending a replacement building with the demolition of Hagstead Hall. Another project is number 15, Madison's Natatorium. The building condition rating is termination and the functional rating is unsatisfactory. And we are recommending a replacement building after demolition of the existing. So to set some context within the framework of this request, 44% of the proposed projects will renovate existing space. 19% will demolish existing space, 13% is new construction, and 24% is replacement space. With all 4 components taken into consideration, we are only impacting 8.44% of our almost, and I'll update Rob's number, 63 million square feet of inventory. Or another means of measure, we are only renovating 3.76% of our existing space. As was mentioned by Vice President Kramer, the university's physical assets' current replacement value is set at about $13.6 billion. The recommended plan will impact about 11.25% of the overall value. More than 58% of the total plan's cost will be to replace existing space. Another 18% of the proposal impacts about 2% of the total value by renovating, restoring, and rehabilitating our existing physical plant. The plan proposes to demolish nearly 1 million square feet. Our program revenue borrowing trend usually mirrors our ability to renovate or build new using housing, dining, parking, or segregated fees. It should be noted that the board request wasn't fully funded in 2015-17 nor in 2017-19. In fact, 4 of the projects resubmitted for consideration this biennium are program revenue supported projects. And if you're wondering why we have a spike in 09-11, it's the Charter Street heating plant for UW-Madison. So this slide provides an overview of the approval trend for new general fund supported borrowing the university has received since 2001. And as you can see, we've been slowly increasing our biennial general fund supported borrowing allotment each time until 2015-17 in that trend that Vice President Kramer mentioned before, about a 4.5% to 5% increase. That's the yellow line. Both the 2015-17 and 2017-19 biennial were cut back by the legislature from the original request by the regents. This slide shows the advanced enumeration projects in the year the funds will be available to us, which is 21-23. However, the Department of Administration lists the advanced enumeration funding in the first year of the biennium, even though the funds are not available to us until the second year of the biennium, or 21-23. What we're showing you in red is the gap from the trend already established, essentially the request that we asked for in 2015-17 and 2017-19 that was not funded. If we then take those same figures that represents the shortfall in approved funding and layer them over the 19-21 biennium, you can see that our proposed plan is attempting to catch us up from the lack of funding in the last 4 years. The first pie chart delineates the categories within the proposed plan. 55% is for major projects, those costing $3 million or more. Another 28% for the advanced enumeration projects. And lastly, about 17% accommodates the all-agency and instructional space programs. Projects generally valued between $5,000 and $3 million. And the second pie chart demonstrates the funding split for the request. 57% is general fund supported borrowing. Another 28 is for program revenue supported borrowing, and the remaining 15%, about $287 million, cash, gifts, grants, and building trust funds. The first 2 categories are system-wide programs designed to repair and renovate and modernize high-priority code, mission-critical, and deferred maintenance issues, and upgrade our utility systems and central plants. And so as of February of this year to just last week, we've received 24 requests to fund emergency, urgent, health and safety requests to replace motor controls, repair chimneys, structurally unsound walkways and egress stairs, heating system repairs, and water main steam pit replacements. Notable incidents have taken place in the last year or so: a steam pipe break at Radio Hall, another steam incident at the Whitewater plant, transformer failure at Eau Claire and River Falls, pipe bursts and pump failures at Madison and Stout, slow deterioration of the exterior brick facades at UWM, frozen sprinkler pipes at Stout, Parkside, and UWM, and too many HVAC unit failures to count that result in water damage throughout our institutions. We did bring pictures, so here's a few images of the program. The second system-wide program will fund high-impact classroom and laboratory upgrades. These are all existing conditions except the lower right-hand corner, which demonstrates a new high-impact learning classroom retrofit. With the exception of the Coate and Sanford example, the other pictures depict a desired future state. Renderings for each of these proposed projects. Our advance enumeration request. So as Vice President Kramer mentioned, we are rolling out a few new tactics to start actively managing the budgets on our projects. The first is the institution of a project charter on every project costing more than $3 million. The charter is designed to bring attention to the project's scope, schedule, and budget, as well as identify challenges, risks, project milestones, etc. It's a form of a contract between the various users and facility staff, delineating communication pathways and decision-making authority. Inflation has been calculated at 3% each 6 months, which averages at about 6.02% each year. On some of the larger capital projects, the total inflationary impact is estimated at multiple millions. And just so you know, construction inflation, we use the Engineering News and World Record, we use the Midwest numbers, and it is a higher number than the CPI. It does sit there. It takes into consideration labor availability, which is a bit of a challenge here in Wisconsin at the moment because our economy is doing well. For example, on the proposed River Falls project, using the DFDM timelines, it's about $34.6 million of inflation. Therefore, we are proposing to hold back a significant portion of the inflation from the design team, since in all reality, inflation hasn't yet occurred, and manage its distribution throughout design as we incur inflationary impacts. So we've spoken at DFDM, and there are a lot of details to work out, such as how do we assess and when do we incur inflationary impact, and is it one step or multiple? Nonetheless, we want to make sure that the design team isn't targeting the full construction budget at the onset with no adjustment for inflationary changes when you get to bid time. With the exception of the River Falls and Whitewater pictures, again, these are all existing conditions. So those are the advanced enumeration projects. So I'm going to run through just a few of the impacts of the budget. These projects propose to add as many as 54 FTE for custodial maintenance activities. However, not all projects will require new staffing. $12 million is the estimate for utilities, associated supplies, and maintenance materials. We do expect replacement facilities to have some better energy efficiency than existing 1960s era facilities. Renovation or replacement of facilities will reduce the significant amount of time staff spend on work orders and other ongoing maintenance activities, permitting them to be redirected to preventative maintenance. Historically, segregated fees to support capital projects are approved as part of the annual operating budget, disassociated with the capital budget, if you will. This biennium, we've included any fees necessary to support the project as part of this board action. Many times the fees associated with a project may be phased in over time, and as such, the board sees incremental components each year. We want to be transparent regarding the underlying fee structure necessary to support a segregated fee-funded project. For the Lacrosse Fieldhouse and Stevens Point Student Recreation Health and Wellness Center, Additional fees are required to fully support these projects. On behalf of UW-Stevens Point, they have reduced their original fee request from $275 to $234 and cut the project budget and scope to accommodate fluctuations in enrollment. At Madison, a recreational sports master plan referendum was approved. Of the 4 projects included in that program, 1 is complete, a field project. 1 is in construction, the new surf, and the natatorium replacement project is included in the plan. As part of that referendum, it was agreed that no fee would be instituted until the new surf opened, which is scheduled for next fall. Therefore, the fees for the surf, or the NIC as we now call it, and the natatorium projects will not be instituted until next fall. We have included both projects and their fees in the overall board resolution. We are required by statute to submit a 6-year plan to the Department of Administration. The resolution before you asks for approval of the 21-19-21 biennial budget and the 6-year plan. Projects included in the 2 out-year biennia may and will change as new master plans are completed or academic and student life priorities are revised. However, planning for the long term helps provide an overall context to the needs of our institutions. It gives those institutions that seek to raise philanthropic funds or obtain grants a possible enumeration target. But more importantly, it gives our institutions time to prepare pre-planning and feasibility studies to ascertain a more complete scope and budget. So there are 2 categories, major projects and capital project programs for each of the biennium. As I mentioned before, about 57% of the first biennium is general fund supported borrowing. So here's the general fund supported borrowing. Program revenue, about 28% in the first biennium of the overall recommendation. And then last but not least, cash, gifts, grants, and building trust funds, about 15% in the first biennium, which is a fabulous number. So I do want to reiterate what Vice President Kramer said. The team at System, but more importantly, our colleagues across the institutions, we demand a fair amount of effort in a short time frame from our 13 institutions to develop and defend their planning efforts. So I want to thank you for your patience through this and open up the floor for questions.
Regents, questions for Alex Rowe? Regent Milner.
No question. This is one of the best reports I've had. It's a visual good report. I also like the fact you went out to 2025. I mean, in real estate, you've got to go out further than the next 2 years. It provides you, thanks. It provides you with an opportunity to understand what's going to go in the future. But we have to make it clear to legislators, this is what we're doing. But I think this is an important report. And also, if you've got a slide that shows the insert of those 2 cutback years, it would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Milner. Other questions for Alex? If not, let's give Rob Kramer and Alex Rowe another round of applause. Let's move on to discussion. Resolution 6 is before us, Regents.
Move approval.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Discussion on resolution number 6, the capital budget. Regent Plot.
First, having gone through this for the first time, I'll echo a lot of the comments from the operation budget comments about how impressive all the data is and how it's been presented. The operation budget certainly makes a statement in our commitment to education. Buildings often are neglected when it comes to that, and from a perspective of my professional career, play an equally important role. And so I think the capital budget that Alex and her team put together is very, very impressive, and certainly does make a statement. I've been through tons of these facilities, both now as a region and just professionally, and the needs are definitely far and are many and many and many, and to take Alex's team and try to prioritize them and then to make sense of it, I'm not even sure, to be honest, where she begins and how you do that. So kudos to that. But if we're going to, really invest and push STEM and cutting-edge innovation and student safety, we have to commit and we have to invest in these types of facilities too. And in her report, she mentioned that, we're playing catch-up to some extent. And in our world in construction, when I look at the K-12 construction projects, they neglect out of necessity for years. And if you look at their cycles, about every 15 years, they have a big construction boom. Well, that's because for the 15 years in between there, they let it fall to the wayside. And if we're training our next generation of workforce and we're pushing, and they are the lifeblood of our economy, we can't allow that to happen at a system level. So kudos to everybody involved with it. I take your hats off. I can't imagine trying to go through all the square footage and facilities and all the needs that are out there and try to make rhyme or reason of it, but I think they did a fantastic job, so thank you.
Thank you, Regent Plot. Other regents? Discussion? Regent Style.
Thank you. As I look at the capital budget, there's a large number of projects, and it's a pretty big price tag. And there's a number of the projects I support, but there's some that I don't. I feel that by passing the number of projects this large, we don't do quite the full justice that we could to identify the academic projects that are the most significant of our priorities. And so as I review the capital budget, I feel it's too large and not quite focused enough, but thank you.
Thank you, Regent Style. Other regents? If no one else, looks like we're ready to vote. All in favor of Resolution 6, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Resolution 6 passes, and thank you, everyone. I do want to again reiterate a thank you to President Cross and his team for putting together what I think were tremendous documents to get us through two complicated budgets. And also I want to thank them for, again, always working with the Governor's Office, the Department of Administration and legislative leaders in building two proposals like this. Their work is very, very much appreciated. Thank you, President Cross. At this time, I'll turn to Regent Vice President Peterson, who will read a very, very long motion to go into closed session. Regent Vice President Peterson.
Indeed, I will. I move that the Board of Regents move into closed session to A, consider personal histories related to the naming of a facility at UW Stevens Point as permitted by Section 19851F, Wisconsin statutes. B, consider personal histories related to the naming of a facility at UW Stout as permitted by the same statutes. C, consider a UW Stout honorary degree nomination as permitted by Section 1985F. D, consider compensation and implementation of the 2017-19 legislatively approved state pay plan adjustments for chancellors and individuals with salaries that exceed 75% of the UW system. President's salary as permitted by Section 19851C. E, brief the board and deliberate on the possibility of a confidential gift or investment in the UW Madison's research enterprises permitted by Section 19851E. F, consider personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons relating to the UW Oshkosh Foundation matter which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have substantial effect upon the reputation of such persons as permitted by Section 19851F Wisconsin statutes. G, confer with legal counsel regarding pending litigation, Bank First National versus UW Oshkosh Foundation, Board of Regents versus Sonleitner and Wells, University of Wisconsin Oshkosh Foundation versus Board of Regents, UW Oshkosh Foundation Incorporated, Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing, and potential litigation as permitted by Section 19851G Wisconsin stats. Section H, discuss ongoing personnel matters as permitted by Section 95851C and F, and I, lastly, to consider personal evaluations of chancellors as permitted by Section 19851C Wisconsin statutes. Do we have a second?
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Regent Delgado. Regent Peters. Regent Creedy. Regent Hall. Regent Jones. Regent Klein. Regent Milner. Regent Peterson. Regent Plot.
Yes.
Regent Ring.
Yes.
Regent Style. Yes. Regent Tyler.
Yes.
Regent Whitberg.
Motion passes. Regents, let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll meet down the hallway in the Sonata room. Thank you.